Dad called after 4 years. "We'll talk at graduation," I replied. "You forgot saying I'm not worth it." He went quiet. Then I walked on stage with a Whitfield medal. My name is Francesca Delaney, and I am 23 years old. 3 weeks ago, I stood on a graduation platform in front of 3,200 people, while my parents, who refused to pay for my education because they didn't think I was worth it, sat in the front row, their faces devoid of color. They came to see my twin sister graduate. They had no idea I was there. They had no idea I would be making the keynote address. But the tale does not begin with graduation. It started 5 years ago, in my parents' living room, when my father looked me directly in the eyes and said something I'll never forget. Before I continue, please take a time to like and subscribe, but only if you enjoyed this tale. Also, let me know in the comments where you're viewing from and what time it is. Let me take you back to that sunny evening in 2020. The admission letters all arrived on the same Tuesday afternoon in April. Madeline was accepted into Whitmore University, a top private institution with a tuition of $68,000 per year. I was accepted to Eastbrook State, a strong public university with an annual tuition of $27,000. Still pricey, but reasonable. That evening, Dad convened a family meeting in the living room. "We need to talk about finances," he continued, sinking into his leather recliner like a CEO addressing shareholders. Mom sat on the sofa, hands folded. Madeline stood near the window, already gleaming with excitement. I sat across from Dad, still holding the acceptance letter. "Madeline, as Dad mentioned, will fund your entire tuition at Whitmore. Room, board, and everything." Madeline squealed. Mom grinned. Then Dad turned to me. "Francesca, we have chosen not to sponsor your schooling." The words did not register at first. "I apologize. Madeline possesses leadership potential. She has good networking skills. She'll marry well. Create relationships. It's a sound investment." He paused. And what happened next felt like a dagger slipping between my ribs. "You're intelligent, Francesca, but you're not unique. There is no return on investment with you." I looked at Mom. She refused to meet my gaze. I looked at Madeline. She was already messaging someone, most likely relaying the good news about Whitmore, so I simply had to find it out for myself. Dad shrugged. "You are resourceful. You'll manage." That night I did not cry. I'd grieved enough over the years about missing birthdays, hand-me-down gifts, and being edited out of family photographs. Instead, I sat in my room and had a life-changing realization. To my parents, I was not their daughter. I wasn't a good investment. But Dad had no idea, and neither did anybody else in the family, that his decision would change the direction of my whole life. 5 years later, he would face the penalties in front of thousands of people. However, this was not a new development. Favoritism had always existed, woven into the fabric of our family like an ugly pattern that everyone attempted to ignore. When we turned 17, Madeline received a beautiful new Honda Civic with a red ribbon on top. I acquired her old laptop, which had a damaged screen and a 45-minute battery life. "We can't afford 2 automobiles," Mom admitted sheepishly. However, they could afford Madeline's ski excursions, fancy prom outfit, and summer abroad in Spain. Family trips were the worst. Madeline always had her own hotel room. I slept on pull-out sofas in the halls. Once, even in a closet that the resort referred to as a lovely nook. Madeline stood in the center of every family portrait, radiant. I was always on the brink, occasionally cut off like an afterthought. When I eventually confronted Mom about it, I was 18 and anxious for answers. She simply sighed. "You're imagining things, sweetheart. We adore you both equally." But deeds do not lie. A few months before the college choice, I discovered Mom's unlocked phone on the kitchen counter. There was an open text thread with Aunt Deborah. I should not have read it, but I did. "Poor Francesca," Mom wrote. "But Richard is correct. She does not stand out. We need to be practical." I put down my phone and walked away. That night I made a decision that no one knew about. I didn't want retribution, I wanted to prove something to myself. I opened my shattered laptop with the fading battery and searched for complete scholarships for independent students. The data loaded slowly, but what I discovered would change everything. I completed the math around 1:45 a.m. I'm seated on my bedroom floor with a notebook and a calculator. Eastbrook State charges $27,000 per year. 5 years, $135,000. Parents' contribution is 0. My savings from summer work are $2,700. The difference was astounding. If I couldn't close it, I had three choices: drop out before I even started, incur seven figures in school debt that would follow me for decades, or study part-time, extending a 5-year degree to 6 or 7 while working full-time. Every road led to the same destination: being precisely who my father claimed I was. The failure, the terrible investment, the unsuccessful twin. I could already hear the family chats during Thanksgiving. Madeline is doing really well at Whitmore. Francesca is still finding things out. However, this was not only about proving them incorrect. It was about proving myself correct. I browsed scholarship databases until my eyes burned. The most important requirements are referrals, essays, and proof of financial necessity. Some were scams. Others' deadlines have already passed. Then I discovered something. Eastbrook offered a merit scholarship program for first-generation and independent students. Tuition is covered in full, along with a living allowance. Is there a catch? Only 6 pupils were picked each year. The competition was severe. I've saved the URL. Then I kept scrolling, and that's when I came across the name that would transform my life. The Whitfield Scholarship. Only 24 students nationally receive a full ride, which includes $12,000 in annual living costs. I laughed aloud. There are 24 students in the entire country. What chances did I have? But I bookmarked it nonetheless. I had 2 options: accept the life my parents planned for me, or create my own. I picked the second option. But to do so, I needed a strategy, and I needed it quickly. That summer I filled out a whole notebook. Every page represented a computation. Every margin was included in the blueprints. Job number 1. Barista at the Morning Grind, a college cafe. 5:30 to 8:30 a.m. Estimated monthly income is $900. Job number 2. Cleaning staff for the residence halls on weekends only, $450 per month. Job number 3. Teaching assistant in the economics department. If I can get that, it'll be another $350. Total, $1,700 each month, or nearly $20,400 per year. Still $6,600 short of tuition. That gap would have to be filled by merit-based scholarships. The sort you earned, not the one you were given. I discovered the cheapest apartment choice within walking distance of college. A small room in a home, shared with 4 other students. $325 per month, including utilities. No parking, no air conditioning, no privacy. It'd have to do. My timetable solidified into something severe but exact. 5:30 a.m. work in the cafe, 9:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., classes, 6:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m., study, employment or TA responsibilities. Sleep, 11:30 p.m. to 4:30 a.m., 5 to 6 hours every night for 5 years. Madeline sent images from her Cancun trip with pals, including sunset beaches, margaritas, and laughing, a week before I went for college. I was putting my thrift shop comforter into a second-hand suitcase. Our lives were already splitting, and we hadn't even begun yet. But this is what kept me going. Every night before going to bed I would whisper the same thing to myself. This is the cost of freedom. Freedom from their expectations. Freedom from their judgment. Freedom from requiring their approval. I had no idea how correct I would be. And I had no idea that somewhere on the Eastbrook campus there was a professor who could see something in me that my own parents couldn't. Thanksgiving is celebrated throughout the freshman year. I sat alone in my small rented room. I held the phone to my ear and listened to the noises of home. Laughter in the background, the clink of dishes, the pleasant bustle of a family reunion I didn't attend. Hello, Francesca. Mom's voice seemed distant and preoccupied. Hello, Mom. Happy Thanksgiving. Oh yeah. Happy Thanksgiving, honey. How are you? I'm okay. Is Dad there? Can I speak to him? A pause. Then I saw his voice in the background, muted, yet distinct. Tell her I'm busy. The words landed like stones. Mom's voice seems overly bright. Your father is just in the middle of something. Madeline told the funniest anecdote. It is okay, Mom. Do you eat enough? Do you need anything? I looked around my room, at the instant ramen on my desk, the second-hand blanket, and the textbook I had borrowed from the library because I couldn't afford to buy one. No, Mom. I don't need anything. Okay. Okay, we adore you. I love you too. I hung up. I then opened Facebook. The first thing I saw on my feed was a photo that Madeline had recently shared. Mom, Dad, and Madeline sit at the dinner table. Candles lighted. Turkey is sparkling. The caption: "Thankful for my wonderful family. My lovely family." I focused on the photograph. There are 3 place settings. 3 chairs, not 4. They hadn't even reserved a spot for me. I sat there for a long time, marveling at the image. Something changed inside me that night. The anguish I'd been carrying for years. The desire for their acceptance, attention, and love. It didn't disappear, but it did alter. It hollowed out. And where the anguish had been, there was just silent nothingness. Strangely, the emptiness provided me something that agony never did. Clarity. Second semester of freshman year. Microeconomics 111. Dr. Elaine Carter was a legend at Eastbrook. 28 years of teaching experience, including publications in all major journals. Terrifying reputation. Students murmured that she had not given an A in 6 years. I sat in the 4th row, took detailed notes, and submitted my first essay, expecting a B- at most. The document came back with 2 letters at the top. A red ink message was found beneath the grade. "See you after class." My heart sank. What did I do wrong? Following the lesson, I approached her desk. Dr. Carter was already packing her luggage, her silver hair tied back into a tight bun and reading spectacles perched on her nose. "Francesca Delaney." "Yes, ma'am. Sit down." I sat. She regarded me over her spectacles. "This essay is one of the greatest examples of student writing I've read in 18 years. Where did you study before to this?" "Nothing exceptional here. Public high school, nothing advanced." "And your family?" "Academics." I paused. "My family does not support my education, either financially or otherwise." The words spilled out before I could stop them. Dr. Carter put down her pen. "Tell me more." So I did. For the first time, I narrated the entire narrative. Favoritism, rejection, 4 jobs, 5 to 6 hours of sleep, all of it. When I finished, she remained silent for a long time. Then she said something that altered my course forever. "Have you heard of the Whitfield Scholarship?" I nodded slowly. "I have seen it, yet it is impossible." She stated there were 24 pupils nationwide. The beneficiaries of full scholarships and living stipends from partner institutions deliver the commencement address at graduation. She leaned forwards. "Francesca, you have enormous potential, but potential is nothing if no one recognizes it. Allow me to help you become noticed." The following 3 years merged into a relentless routine. Wake up at 4:30 a.m., coffee shop by 5. Classes start at 9. Library open till 1 a.m. Sleep and repeat. I missed every party, football game, and late-night pizza run. While other students made memories, I maintained a 4.0 GPA for 8 consecutive semesters. There were times when I almost broke. I once collapsed during a shift at the cafe. Exhaustion, the doctor explained. Dehydration. I was back at work the next day. Another time I sat in my automobile, which was actually Reese Callahan's. She'd given it to me for a job interview and sobbed for 20 minutes. Not because of anything specific, but because everything had happened at the same time for years. But I kept going. Junior year, Dr. Carter summoned me to her office. "I'm nominating you for the Whitfield." I gazed at her. "Are you serious? 9 essays and 4 rounds of interviews. It will be the most difficult thing you've ever done." She paused. "But you've previously made it through more difficult circumstances." The application took 10 weeks of my life. Essays on resilience, leadership and vision, phone interviews with faculty panels, background checks, and reference letters. Madeline texted me in the middle of the conversation. "First time in months. Mom claims you don't return home for Christmas anymore. That is sort of sad. TBH. I read the message. Then I put my phone face down and returned to my essay. The truth. I couldn't afford the plane ticket. But even if I could, I was unsure whether I wanted to go. That Christmas, I sat alone in my rented room with a cup of instant noodles and the miniature paper Christmas tree Reese had created for me. No relatives, no presents, and no drama. It was the most relaxing holiday I'd ever had. The email arrived at 6:52 a.m. on a Tuesday in September of senior year. Subject: Whitfield Foundation. Final round notice. My hands were so shaky that I couldn't scroll. Dear Miss Delaney, congrats. Out of 240 applicants, you were chosen as one of 60 finalists for the Whitfield Scholarship. The final round will include an in-person interview at our New York headquarters. There were 60 finalists and 24 winners. I had a 40% probability if everything else was equal. However, things were never equal. The interview was set on Friday in New York, 860 miles distant. I examined my bank account balance, which was $912. A last-minute flight would cost a minimum of $430. The remaining portions would be consumed by a hotel, and I had rent due in 13 days. I was about to close my laptop when Reese knocked on the door. Frankie, it looks like you saw a ghost. I showed her the email. She screamed. Literally screamed. You're leaving, she said. Beck, this concludes our discussion. I cannot afford it. The bus ticket costs $59, leaves Thursday night and arrives Friday morning. I will lend you the money. I can't ask you to. You aren't asking. I am telling. She grabbed my shoulders. Frankie, this is your opportunity. You do not get another one. So I took a bus. 9 hours overnight. Arriving in Manhattan around 5:15 a.m. with a stiff neck and a borrowed blazer from the thrift shop. The interview waiting room was packed with polished candidates, designer bags, hovering parents, and easy confidence. I looked down at my second-hand outfit and scuffed shoes. I didn't think I belonged here. Then I recalled Dr. Carter's words. You don't have to belong. You must demonstrate to them that you are worthy of it. 12 days after the interview, I was walking to my morning shift when my phone vibrated. Subject: Whitfield Scholarship. I decided to stop in the middle of the sidewalk. A cyclist swerved around me and cursed. I did not hear him. I opened the email. Dear Ms. Delaney, we are delighted to inform you that you have been selected as a Whitfield Scholar for the class of 2025. I read it 3 times. Then 4. Then I sat down on the curb and cried. But not quietly. Strangers stared as they heard ugly heaving sobs. 3 years of exhaustion, loneliness, and unyielding determination poured out of me right there on the sidewalk outside morning grind. I was a Whitfield Scholar, which included full tuition, $12,000 in living expenses per year, and the ability to transfer to any partner university in their network. That night, Dr. Carter called me directly. Francesca, I just received the notification. I'm really proud of you. Thank you for everything. There's something else, she explained. The Whitfield allows you to transfer to a partner school for your senior year. The list includes Whitmore University. Whitmore is Madeline's school. If you transfer, Dr. Carter explained, you will graduate with the highest honors and the Whitfield Scholar will deliver the commencement speech. My breath caught. Francesca, you would be valedictorian. You would give a graduation speech in front of everyone. I thought about my parents, who were sitting in the audience for Madeline's special day, completely unaware that I was there. I'm not doing this for vengeance, I admitted quietly. I understand. I'm doing it because Whitmore offers the best program for my career. I understand that as well. I halted. But if they see you shine, it's just a bonus. I made my decision that night and informed no one in my family. 4 weeks into my final semester at Whitmore, it happened. I was on the 3rd floor of the library, tucked in a corner carrel with my constitutional law textbook, when I heard a voice that made my stomach drop. Oh my God, Francesca. I looked up. Madeline stood 4 feet away, holding a half-empty iced latte and her mouth hanging open. What are you? How are you? She couldn't construct a complete sentence. I closed my book calmly. Hello, Madeline. When did you first start going here? Mom and Dad didn't speak. Mom and Dad do not know. She blinked. What do you mean, they don't know? Exactly as I said. They don't realize I'm here. Madeline set her coffee down and continued to stare at me as if I had appeared out of nowhere. But how? They're not paying for it, so how did you do it? I paid for it myself for Whitmore. I transferred my scholarship. The words hung between us. Madeline's expression shifted. Confusion, disbelief, and something else. Something that resembled shame. Why didn't you tell anybody? I gazed at her. My twin sister. The person who had received everything I'd been denied. The one who hadn't asked me how I was surviving in 5 years. Have you ever asked? She opened her mouth, then closed it. I collected my books. I need to make it to class. Francesca, please wait. She grabbed my arm. Do you hate us? What about the family? I looked at her hand on my sleeve and then at her expression. No. I replied quietly. You can't hate someone you've stopped caring about. I pulled my arm free and walked away. That night my phone lit up with missed calls. Mom, Dad, and Madeline again. I silenced them all. Whatever came, it would be on my terms, not theirs. Madeline contacted them immediately. I know because she told me after everything was over. She's arrived, Madeline said, barely through the door of her apartment. Francesca is attending Whitmore. She has been here since September. According to Madeline, the silence on the other end lasted 12 seconds. Then Dad's voice. That is impossible. She does not have the money. She mentioned scholarship. What scholarship? She is not qualified for a scholarship. Dad, I saw her at the library. She says I'll handle this. Dad called me the following morning. This was the first time he called me in 4 years. Francesca, we need to talk. What is this about? Madeline says you are at Whitmore. You transferred without informing us. I didn't expect you to care. A pause. Of course I care. You are my daughter. Am I? The words came out flatly. Not bitter. Simply factual. You said I wasn't worth the investment. Remember that? Silence. Francesca, that happened 5 years ago in the living room. You said I wasn't special and there was no return on investment with me. I don't remember saying I do. More silence, then we can discuss this in person at graduation. We're coming to Madeline's ceremony, and I know you'll be there, Dad. I hung up. He did not call back. That night, I sat in my small apartment, which I had paid for myself with money I had earned, and reflected on that conversation. He forgot or chose not to remember. Either way, he'd never seen me. Not really. But in 3 months, he would. And that moment would not come because I forced him to look. It would be because he was unable to look away. The weeks before graduation became strangely quiet. I knew they were coming. Mom, Dad, Madeline, and the entire Perfect Family unit descended on campus to celebrate Madeline's big accomplishment. They had reserved a hotel, scheduled a dinner, and ordered flowers for her. They still didn't know the whole picture. Madeline told them I was at Whitmore, but she was unaware of the Whitfield. She was unaware of the valedictorian honor. She had no idea I had been asked to deliver the commencement address. Dr. Carter called to check in. She had made the trip to watch. Would you like me to notify your family about the speech? No, Francesca. I want them to hear it along with everyone else. She was silent for a moment. This isn't meant to make them feel bad. No, I replied honestly. It is about telling the truth. If they happen to be in the audience, that is their business. Reese drove up to the ceremony. She helped me choose a dress. It was the first new piece of clothing I had purchased in over 2 years that wasn't from a thrift store. Navy blue, simple and elegant. You look like a CEO, she commented. I feel like throwing up. It's probably the same thing. I was unable to sleep the night before my graduation. Not from nerves exactly. I kept wondering how I would feel if I saw them. Will the old pain come back? Would I want them to be hurt the same way I was hurt? I stared at the ceiling until 3 a.m., looking for answers. What I discovered surprised me. I didn't seek vengeance. I did not want them to suffer. I simply wanted to be free. And I'd be there tomorrow, either way. Hello. I'd like to pause for a moment. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, or if you know what it's like to work twice as hard for half the recognition, please share your experience in the comments. I'd like to know how many of us have been through this, and if you're enjoying the story so far, click the like button. It's very helpful. Now back to graduation morning, May 19th. The weather felt almost ironic, with a bright sun and a clear blue sky. Whitmore Stadium had a seating capacity of 3,200. By 9:30 a.m., it was almost full. Families pouring through the gates, flowers and balloons everywhere, and the sound of excited conversation fills the air. I arrived early and slipped in through the faculty entrance. My regalia differed from the other graduates. Yes, I wore a standard black gown, but across my shoulders was the valedictorian's gold sash. The Whitfield Scholar Medallion was pinned to my chest, its bronze surface gleaming in the morning light. I took my seat in the VIP section in front of the stage, which was reserved for honors students and speakers. Madeline was taking selfies with her friends about 25 feet away, in the general graduate section. she had not seen me yet. My parents sat in the front row of the audience, dead center, with the best seats in the house. Dad wore his navy suit, which he saved for special occasions. Mom wore a cream-colored dress and held a massive bouquet of roses in her lap. Between them sat an empty chair, most likely used for coats and purses. Not for me. Never for me. Dad was fiddling with his camera, adjusting the settings, preparing to capture Madeline's moment. Mom was smiling and waving to someone across the aisle. They looked so happy and proud. They had no idea. The university president approached the podium. The crowd went silent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Whitmore University Class of 2025 commencement ceremony. Applause. Cheers. I sat completely still, hands folded in my lap. In a few minutes they would call out my name, and everything would change. I looked back at my parents, their expectant expressions, their cameras ready for Madeline's shining moment. Soon, I thought, you would see me. The ceremony unfolded in waves. Welcome speech, acknowledgements, honorary degrees, and the usual pageantry that stretches time like taffy. The university president returned to the podium. Now it is my great honor to introduce this year's valedictorian and Whitfield Scholar. I felt my heart rate increase, a student who has demonstrated exceptional resilience, academic excellence, and moral fortitude. My mother leaned over to speak with my father from the audience. He nodded, adjusted his camera lens, and pointed to Madeline. Please join me in welcoming Francesca Delaney. Nothing happened during that brief pause. Then I stood. 3,200 pairs of eyes turned to me. I walked toward the podium, my heels clicking on the stage floor and the gold sash swaying with each step. The Whitfield medallion gleamed on my chest, and from the front row, I saw my parents' faces change. Dad's hand froze around his camera. Mom's bouquet slid sideways. Confusion came first. Who is that? Then, recognition. Wait. Is that a shock? It cannot be. Then nothing but a pale, stricken silence. Madeline turned her head toward the stage. Her jaw dropped. I noticed her mouthing my name. Francesca. I reached the podium and adjusted the microphone. 3,200 people applauded. My parents did not. They just sat there frozen, as if someone had pressed pause on their entire existence. For the first time in my life, they looked at me. Really looking. Not at Madeline. Not through me. At me. I let the applause fade. I then leaned into the microphone. Good morning, everyone. My voice was steady and calm. I was told 5 years ago that I was not worth the investment. My mother's hand flew to her mouth from the front row. Dad's camera hung uselessly at his side, so I began to speak. I was told I didn't have what it takes. My voice echoed throughout the stadium, amplified by the sound system and steady as a heartbeat. I was told to expect less from myself because others expected less from me. However, as 3,200 people sat in complete silence, I learned to expect more. I discussed the 4 jobs, the 5 to 6 hours of sleep, the instant ramen dinners, and the used textbooks. I discussed what it means to create something from nothing. Not because you wanted to prove anyone wrong, but because you needed to prove yourself correct. I didn't mention any names. I did not point fingers. I did not need to. The most valuable gift I received was not financial support or encouragement. It was the chance to discover who I am without anyone's validation. My mother was in the front row, crying. Not the proud, joyful tears of a graduation ceremony. Something rare. Something that looked like grief. My father sat motionless, staring at the podium like he was seeing a stranger. Maybe he was. To anyone who has ever been told, "You're not enough." I paused, letting the words settle. You are. You always have been. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the other graduates who'd struggled, at the parents who'd sacrificed, at the friends who'd believed, and yes, at my own family sitting in the front row like statues. I am not here because someone believed in me. I am here because I learned to believe in myself. The applause that followed was thunderous. People rose to their feet, standing ovation, 3,200 people cheering for a girl they'd never met. I stepped back from the podium, and as I descended the stage, I saw Charles Kensington III waiting at the bottom. But he wasn't the only one. The reception area buzzed with champagne and congratulations. I was shaking hands with the dean when I saw them approaching. My parents moving through the crowd like they were wading through water. Dad reached me first. Francesca. His voice was hoarse. Why didn't you tell us? I accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server, took a sip. Have you ever asked? He opened his mouth, closed it. Mom arrived beside him. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. Baby, I'm so sorry. We did not know. So sorry you knew. I kept my voice even. You chose not to see. That is not fair. Dad started. Fair? The word came out calm, not sharp. You told me I wasn't worth investing in. You paid $4.3 million for Madeline's education and told me to figure it out myself. That's what happened. Mom reached for me. I stepped back. Francesca, please. I'm not angry, I said. And I meant it. The anger had burned away years ago, replaced by something cleaner. But I'm not the same person who left your house 5 years ago. Dad's jaw tightened. I made an error. I said things I shouldn't have. You said what you believed. I met his eyes. You were right about one thing, though. I wasn't worth the investment. Not to you, but I was worth every sacrifice I made for myself. He flinched like I'd struck him. Charles Kensington III appeared at my elbow, extending his hand. Miss Delaney, brilliant speech. The foundation is proud to have you. I shook his hand while my parents watched. The founder of one of the nation's most prestigious scholarships, treating their worthless daughter like a treasure. I saw it hit them then, the full weight of what they'd missed, what they'd thrown away, after Mr. Kensington moved on. I turned back to my parents. They looked smaller somehow, diminished. I'm not going to pretend everything's fine, I said, because it's not. Francesca, please, Mom whispered. Can we just talk as a family? We are talking. I mean, really talk. Come home for the summer, let us know. The word was firm, but not harsh. I have a job in New York. I start in 12 days. I won't be coming home. Dad stepped forward. You're cutting us off just like that. I'm setting boundaries. I held my voice steady. There's a difference. What do you want from us? His voice cracked. For the first time in my life, I saw my father look lost. Tell me what you want, and I'll do it. I considered the question. Really considered it. I don't want anything from you anymore. That's the point. I took a breath. But if you want to talk, really talk, you can call me. I might answer. I might not. It depends on whether you're calling to apologize or to make yourself feel better. Mom was crying again. We love you, Francesca. We've always loved you. Maybe, I said. But love isn't just words. It's choices. And you made yours. Madeline appeared at the edge of our circle, hovering uncertainly. Francesca. She hesitated. Congratulations. Thank you. No hug, no tearful reconciliation. But no cruelty either. I'll call you sometime, I told her. If you want. She nodded, eyes wet. I'd like that. I turned and walked away, not running, not escaping, just moving forward. Dr. Carter was waiting by the exit, a quiet smile on her face. You did well, she said. I'm free, I replied. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. The ripples started before my parents even left campus. At the reception, I watched it happen. Watched the slow realizations spread through the crowd of family, friends, and acquaintances. Mrs. Hargrove from the country club approached my mother. Caroline, I didn't know Francesca went to Whitmore and Whitfield Scholar. You must be so proud. My mother's smile looked like it hurt. Yes, we're very proud. How on earth did you keep it a secret? If my daughter won that, I'd have it on billboards. My mother didn't have an answer. Over the following weeks, the questions multiplied. Dad's business partners asked about me. Saw your daughter's speech online. Incredible story. You must have really pushed her to excel. He couldn't tell them the truth. That he'd done the opposite. Madeline called me 4 days after graduation. Mom hasn't stopped crying. Dad barely talks. He just sits there. I'm sad to hear that. Are you? I thought about it. I don't want them to suffer, but I'm not responsible for their feelings. Silence on the line. Francesca. I'm sorry. I should have asked. I should have paid attention. I was so wrapped up in my own stuff. And I know you knew I was oblivious. I knew you had no reason to notice. I halted. Neither of us chose the way they raised us, but we can choose what happens next. More silence. Do you hate me? No. And I meant it. I don't have the energy to hate anyone. I just want to move forward. Can we maybe get coffee sometime? Start over? I thought about my sister, about the girl who'd gotten everything and still ended up empty-handed in a different way. Yeah, I said. I'd like that, I said. 10 weeks after graduation, I stood in my new apartment in Manhattan. It was small, a studio really. 2 windows overlooking a brick wall, kitchen the size of a closet. But it was mine. I'd signed the lease with money from my first paycheck at Morrison & Associates, one of the top financial consulting firms in the city. Entry-level position, long hours, steep learning curve. I'd never been happier. Dr. Carter called on a Saturday morning. How's the big city treating you? Exhausting, exciting, everything they warned me about. She laughed. That sounds about right. I'm proud of you, Francesca. I hope you know that. I do. Thank you for everything. Reese visited the following weekend. She walked into my studio, looked around, and declared it exactly as small and depressing as expected. Then she hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. You did it, Frankie. You actually did it. One evening I found a letter in my mailbox, handwritten, 4 pages, my mother's looping script. Dear Francesca, I don't expect you to forgive us. I'm not sure I would if I were you. She wrote about regret, about the 1,000 small ways she'd failed me, about watching me on that stage and realizing she'd been looking at a stranger who was also her daughter. I know I can't undo what happened, but I want you to know. I see you now. I see who you've become. And I am so sorry I didn't see you sooner. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't respond. Not yet. Not because I was punishing her, but because I needed time to figure out what I wanted to say, if anything. For once, the choice was mine. Okay, we're almost at the end, but I have to ask, if you were in my shoes, would you forgive your parents? Comment yes if you'd forgive them, no if you wouldn't, or maybe if like me you'd need time. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. We've got so many more stories like this one coming. Alright, here's how it all ended. I used to think love was something you earned. That if I was smart enough, good enough, successful enough, my parents would finally see me. That their approval was a prize at the end of some invisible race. 5 years of struggle taught me something different. You can't make someone love you the right way. You can't earn what should have been given freely, and you can't spend your whole life waiting for people to notice your worth. At some point, you have to notice it yourself. I look at my life now, my apartment, my job, my friends who chose me, and I realize something. I built this, every piece of it. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of necessity. My parents' rejection didn't break me. It rebuilt me. The girl who sat in that living room 5 years ago, desperate for her father's approval, she doesn't exist anymore. In her place is a woman who knows exactly what she's worth and doesn't need anyone else to validate it. Some nights I still think about them, about the family dinners I wasn't invited to, the Christmas photos without my face, the $250,000 they spent on my sister while I ate ramen in a rented room. It still hurts sometimes. I don't think it ever stops hurting completely. But the hurt doesn't control me anymore. I've learned something that took years to understand. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about releasing your own grip on the pain. I'm not there yet. Not fully. But I'm working on it. And for the first time in my life, I'm working on it for me. Not to make anyone else comfortable. Not to keep the peace. Just for me. 7 months after graduation, my phone rang. Dad. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Hello, Francesca. His voice sounded different. Tired. Thank you for picking up. I wasn't sure I would. Silence then. I deserve that. I waited. I've been thinking every day since graduation, trying to figure out what to say to you. He paused. I keep coming up empty. Then just say what's true. Another long pause. I was mistaken. Not just about the money, about everything. The way I treated you. The things I said. The years I didn't call. Didn't ask. Didn't. His voice cracked. I have no excuse. I was your father, and I failed you. I listened to him breathe on the other end of the line. "I hear you," I said finally. "That's all." "What did you expect?" "I do not know. I thought maybe you'd tell me how to fix this. It's not my job to tell you how to fix what you broke." More silence. "You're correct." He sounded older than I'd ever heard him. "You're absolutely right." But I took a breath. "If you want to try, I'm willing to let you." "You are?" "I'm not promising anything. No family dinners, no pretending everything's fine. But if you want to have a real conversation, honest, no deflecting, I'll listen." "That's more than I deserve." "Yes, it is." He laughed, a small broken sound. "You've always been the strong one, Francesca. I was just too blind to see it." "Yeah," I said. "You were." We talked for a few more minutes. Nothing profound, just two people trying to find common ground across years of wreckage. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. It's been 3 years since graduation. I'm still in New York, still at Morrison & Associates, though I've been promoted 3 times. I'm starting my MBA at Colia this fall, paid for by my company. The kid who ate ramen and slept 5 to 6 hours a night. She'd hardly recognize me now, but I haven't forgotten her. I carry her with me every day. Madeline and I meet for coffee twice a month. It's awkward sometimes. We're learning to be sisters as adults, which is strange because we never really were as kids, but she's trying. I can see that now. "I'm sorry I didn't see it," she told me at our last coffee date. "All those years, I was so focused on what I was getting. I never asked what you weren't." "I understand." "How do you not hate me for that? Because you didn't create the system, you just benefited from it." My parents came to visit 6 weeks ago. First time in New York. It was uncomfortable, stilted. Dad spent half the time apologizing. Mom spent the other half crying. But they came. They showed up at my door in my city, in the life I built without them. That meant something. I'm not ready to call us a family again. That word carries too much weight, too much history, but we're something. Working on something. 6 weeks ago, I wrote a check to the Eastbrook State Scholarship Fund. $12,000, anonymous, for students without family financial support. Reese cried when I told her, "Frankie, you're literally changing someone's life. Someone changed mine." I thought about Dr. Carter, about the coffee shop shifts at dawn, about the night I bookmarked the Whitfield Scholarship, never believing I'd actually win it, about how far I've come, and about how far I still want to go. If you're watching this and something in my story resonated with you, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told you weren't good enough by the people who were supposed to love you most, I want you to hear this. They were wrong. They were always wrong. Your worth is not determined by who sees it. It's not a number on a check or a seat at a table or a place in a photo. Your worth exists whether or not a single person on this planet acknowledges it. I spent 19 years of my life waiting for my parents to notice me. I spent 5 more proving that I didn't need them to. And you know what I finally learned? The approval I was chasing was never going to fill the hole inside me. Only I could do that. Some of you are estranged from your families. Some of you are still fighting for scraps of attention. Some of you are just starting to realize that the love you're getting isn't the love you deserve. Wherever you are in that journey, I want you to know it's okay to protect yourself. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to decide that you matter more than keeping the peace. And it's okay to forgive, but only when you're ready, not a moment before. You don't need your parents, your siblings, or anyone else to confirm what you already know. You are enough. You always have been. Take a look in the mirror and say it out loud. I am enough. That's the first step. The rest, that's up to you. But I believe in you. Because if a girl who was called not worth the investment can stand on a stage in front of 3,200 people as a Whitfield scholar, you can do anything. Thank you for staying until the end. My dad toasted my sister's wedding, my only daughter. Then he pointed at me. A mistake I made 32 years ago. Now my phone shows 73 missed calls. What did you do? My name is Ava Bennett. I'm 32 years old and 6 weeks ago, my own father stood up at my younger sister's wedding and erased me in front of 180 guests. I was standing in the back of the ballroom, behind the videographer's tripod, doing what I always do at family gatherings, remaining out of the way and pretending it didn't hurt. When my father took up the microphone for his speech, I had this ridiculous hope that for once, he'd remember he had 2 daughters. Out of habit, I opened my phone's voice memo app and hit record. That reflex, more than anything else, is why you are hearing this story right now. He tapped the glass with a fork. He addressed my daughter, and for a brief moment, my heart lifted. Then he laughed. I should say, my only daughter. This incredible woman up here is the pride of my life. That thing is standing in the back. As scores of heads turned, he made a vague gesture toward me. That was simply a mistake I made 32 years ago. Honestly, we should have put her up for adoption when we had the opportunity. The ballroom erupted. Some people laughed because they thought it was a joke, others because everyone else did. A few people looked away, embarrassed. Nobody stopped him. Nobody told him to sit down. I did not weep. I did not yell. I looked my father directly in the eyes, then slowly swept my gaze across the faces of those who had just witnessed my public execution and decided it was entertainment. Then I turned around, walked out of the ballroom, through the lobby, and out the revolving doors into the cold, wind-swept rain. On the sidewalk, water dripping through my dress, my phone still recording in my hand. I made myself a promise. This would be the final time they laughed at me without consequences. That night, I made 4 phone calls and sent 2 emails, which changed everything. 10 weeks later, my phone would show 73 missed calls and messages from the same people who laughed, all asking the same question. What have you done to us? Before I tell you what I did and how those 4 calls and 2 emails turned my father's joke into his worst nightmare, please tell me this. What time is it where you are now, and where are you watching from? I want to see how far the truth about my disastrous life can travel. The morning after the wedding, I awoke on my couch in Boston, still wearing the ruined dress. The edges of my eyes were crusted with mascara. My phone is on my chest. I started by pressing play on the recording. Hearing my father's voice through my earbuds, without the clinking glasses and polite laughter to obscure it, felt like being slapped a second time. I listened all the way until the ballroom roared and my heels clicked against the marble floor as I walked out. Then I saved the file, renamed it Evidence, Wedding Speech, and backed it up to the encrypted cloud storage I use for work. I work as a cybersecurity consultant for hospitals. Backing up sensitive data is second nature. Yesterday there were patient files and ransomware logs. Today, it was my father's voice calling me out for a mistake. I told myself 1,000 stories to get through the last 32 years. He is old school. That's all part of his sense of humor. You are overreacting. However, listening back, there was no way to soften it. He meant every word. And if he was willing to say that into a microphone in public, what else was he willing to do when no one was watching? The first call I made that night, standing in the rain, was to the only adult in my childhood who had ever seemed quietly horrified by how I was treated, my father's younger brother. For me, he had always been Uncle Jack. To the rest of the world, he was Jack Sullivan, my father's former co-founder, who had retired under mysterious circumstances 12 years prior. When he answered, his voice was sleepy and concerned. Ava, are you all right? I noticed the live stream cut out. But did you hear what he said? My voice did not shake. It came out cold. Have you heard the speech? There was a pause, followed by a slow exhalation. Your cousin sent me the clip, he said quietly. I've seen it 3 times. Your father has lost his mind. No, I explained. He's just saying out loud what he's always thought. I also recorded it. I'm done pretending it's just his sense of humor. I'd like to know what he's hiding. I'd like to know why he's always treated me as a problem that he regrets, rather than a daughter. Another pause, longer this time. Ava, this isn't just about hurt feelings, he explained. If you start pulling threads around Thomas Bennett, you'll find more than just mean jokes. You'll discover things you can't unsee. Then help me see them. I corrected myself. I'm not a kid anymore. You were pushed out of Bennett Civic Systems. I know that wasn't as clean as he made it sound. You know where the bodies are buried. Is this really what you want? He asked. Because once you start, there's no turning back from Sunday dinners and fake smiles. I remembered the ballroom laughter. We both know I was never truly invited to Sunday dinner. I said, meet me tomorrow, tell me the truth. He sighed. And in that sigh, I heard 12 years of suppressed resentment. Fine. 12:30 p.m. at the Quincy Diner. Do not text this address to anyone. And Ava, do not bring the phone that your father paid for. After I hung up with him, I dialed the second number, Natalie Pierce, my college roommate who is now one of the state's best financial crime attorneys. We hadn't spoken in months, but the moment she heard my voice, she knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she inquired. I sent her the audio file right there on the sidewalk, watching the upload bar move across the screen while raindrops dripped down my wrist. When it was finished, I asked, "Listen, then tell me what I can do with this." The third call was to my work phone. In other words, to myself. I left a detailed voicemail documenting what had happened, including dates, times, and the fact that I had recorded it. Then I converted the voicemail into a transcript and saved it in a secure folder alongside the speech. It wasn't just my heart speaking anymore. It was evidence. The email was sent to a generic, boring-looking address, integritymassprocurement.gov, the state procurement office's anonymous tip line. I didn't accuse my father of anything, not yet. I simply asked what citizens should do if they suspected a major city contractor was cooking books and retaliating against family members who knew too much. I pressed send at 1:42 a.m., my fingers still trembling, and watched the tiny paper plane icon vanish. Uncle Jack slid into the booth across from me at the diner the next day, his eyes red and his hands wrapped around his coffee as if he needed them to keep from shaking. For the first time in my life, he appeared terrified of my father. "You really want to know why he treats you like that?" he inquired without preamble. "Because you're the one thing he can't control. You chose cybersecurity instead of joining his empire. You refused to sign his standard family agreement when you graduated, and he's been moving money and contracts into your sister's name for years to punish you for that." He removed a folded packet of old emails and board minutes from his jacket. He cut me out because I informed him that what he was doing was illegal. Fraud, kickbacks for public works projects, and false safety reports. Everything would blow up if someone with your skills and my receipts went digging. I stared at the papers, everything in me becoming very still. "So let us dig," I said. "If he insists that I'm a mistake, I will be the type of mistake that destroys his perfect little world. If you were in my situation, humiliated on camera by your own father and then given the first evidence that he may be a criminal, would you walk away to protect your family, or would you begin pulling on every thread you could find?" Natalie Pierce did not waste time. By the afternoon after the diner meeting, we were sitting in a cramped conference room at her firm, the kind with no windows and a humming fluorescent light that made everything seem more serious. I had already scanned Uncle Jack's documents and sent them to her via a secure portal. She had read them twice before I arrived. "Okay," she replied, tapping the stack with her pen. "Bennett Civic Systems is run by your father, Thomas Bennett. They have had public contracts with the city for 18 years. Traffic lights, smart intersections and parking systems. These minutes show that he pushed his own brother out just before the company's biggest deal." She held up a photocopied email as a threat. "Sign the separation agreement and don't talk about billing practices, or you'll never work in this town again." "He wasn't joking," Uncle Jack muttered. "I've been barred from city contracts ever since." My stomach turned. I grew up hearing my father discuss providing for the family. All of those late nights saved the city money. Now those stories tasted like ash. Natalie turned to face me. "You work in cybersecurity for hospitals." She spoke. "You understand logs, metadata, network traffic. If your uncle's right and your father is double billing or falsifying safety reports, there will be digital footprints everywhere. On email servers, in PDF drafts, in version histories." She tilted her head. "But we do it by the book. No illegal hacking. We use what you can legally obtain through family, public records, and what your uncle already owns. Understood?" I nodded. Understood. I lied a little. We began with what was public. I spent nights after work combing through city procurement databases, downloading every contract Bennett Civic Systems had won over the last decade. I compared project timelines to news stories about mysterious delays and unexplained outages, including one that made my blood run cold. A pedestrian died at an intersection where the new smart lights had malfunctioned. At the same time, Uncle Jack requested his personnel file and board correspondence from the years preceding his dismissal, citing whistleblower protections. Some of it came back heavily redacted, but Natalie knew which black bars indicated that someone was hiding something they shouldn't. At her urging, I submitted a formal request under the state's public records law for all safety inspections involving Bennett Civic Systems. Weeks have passed. My days were spent conducting hospital security audits and employee phishing trainings. My nights were spent working on spreadsheets and PDFs, and highlighter marks littered my kitchen table. As I dug deeper, a pattern began to emerge. Change orders are signed on Fridays at 4:50 p.m., doubling project costs without a clear justification. Invoices for consulting services issued to shell companies without websites. All are registered to a PO. The box is near my father's office. City engineers repeatedly expressed concern about vendor pressure to sign off on projects quickly. Each time I connected a dot, I heard his voice again. That thing in the back is simply a mistake. One afternoon I opened a spreadsheet that displayed the distribution of company shares. That's when his favoritism went beyond emotion. It became financial. 6 years ago, my sister Chloe was given a 30% stake in Bennett Civic Systems in recognition of her marketing and strategy efforts. My name did not appear anywhere. However, a familiar signature appeared on a line labeled Waiver of Future Claims to Family Assets. Mine was from the week I graduated college. I remembered the document now. He'd called it a standard form to make estate planning easier and shoved it in front of me at a noisy graduation dinner. I signed without reading, because I was overwhelmed and wanted to avoid a fight. My hands clenched around the printout until it creased. That night, I texted Natalie everything. He manipulated you into signing away your rights so he could funnel assets to your sister, she explained over the phone. It's disgusting, but it may also be leverage, especially if we can show a pattern of coercion and retaliation. Retaliation like humiliating me publicly to make sure I never challenge him, was what I responded. Exactly, she responded. We created a timeline. My graduation, the waiver, Uncle Jack's forced departure, the big city contract, the broken lights, and the wedding speech. The line between family joke and weapon became painfully clear. 2 weeks into our deep dive, I received an email from the procurement integrity inbox, which I had messaged following the wedding. This was not a form auto-response. It came from a real person, Ethan Caldwell, a compliance officer who asked if I would be willing to speak confidentially about potential Bennett Civic Systems irregularities. I looked at the screen for a long time. This was it. The moment when my private, petty and apparent family humiliation collided with actual law. I forwarded the email to Natalie. She called within minutes. If you talk to them, Ava, this will no longer be just a revenge fantasy. She stated that it becomes a whistleblower case. Are you prepared for that? For subpoenas, hearings, and informing your family that it was you? I imagined my father raising his glass and the room erupting. I imagined my mother looking away rather than stepping in, and my sister laughing along so she didn't ruin her wedding vibe. He chose to make me the villain in his story a long time ago. I said, if I'm going to be the villain, I might as well be the one who tells the truth. I agreed to attend the meeting. We scheduled it 4 weeks in advance to allow Natalie time to prepare. During those 4 weeks, the atmosphere at my parents' house, where I was still technically renting the small attic apartment, shifted from chilly to paranoid. My father began locking his home office. My mother jumped whenever the landline rang. Whispered conversations ended the moment I walked into the kitchen. They knew I was up to something. They didn't know what, but they were about to find out. If you discovered that your family's money and your own eraser were based on lies and rigged paperwork, would you keep the peace or risk blowing up everything to bring those secrets to light? Working in cybersecurity teaches you that people are careless with their passwords. My dad was no exception. Years ago, when I helped him set up his first smartphone, he insisted on using the same simple password that he'd always used. I begged him to change it. He refused. No one's interested in some old man's emails, he said sarcastically. He was not my client, so I let it go. Now sitting in my attic with my laptop's glow on my face and the wedding recording playing in my headphones, I opened a private browser window and entered Bennett Civic Systems' webmail address. I paused. Natalie's warning about sticking to the book echoed in my head. But then I remembered the waiver I signed at 23. The way he weaponized my trust. He never followed the rules when it came to controlling me. Why was I still playing nice? I typed in his corporate address and the old lazy password. The inbox has been loaded. Hundreds of messages, contract negotiations, forwarded jokes, and a few all-staff memos in which he complimented my brilliant daughter Chloe on her presentation. Nothing about his mistake in having a daughter. Of course, I did not snoop for fun. I established a simple silent rule. Any email he sent or received containing certain keywords, such as audit, inspection, change order, or my name, would be automatically forwarded to a new encrypted account I'd set up under a random alias. Then I signed out. If he was ever breached, There would be no clear path back to me. Within days, the forwarded emails began to trickle in. A thread in which a city engineer objected to signing off early. My father responded, "We've taken care of your supervisor, don't worry about it." An exchange with a banker about moving the final chunk into HC's trust before year-end. HC could only be Chloe. And then, one Thursday, an email appeared with a subject line that made my skin crawl. Saturday night, we had family dinner. It was not sent to me directly. It was from my father to my mother and sister. "We need to get Ava back in line before she does something stupid." He had written, "Let's keep things calm, make it appear as if we want to hear her out. I'll have the paperwork ready." My mother replied, "Are you sure this will work?" My sister, "It's my second weekend back from the honeymoon, Dad. Can we not make this a war?" My father, "It's already a war. She simply doesn't know the rules." Saturday at 6:45 p.m. That restaurant she enjoys. She will come if you invite her. I had no idea what paperwork he meant, but I knew I wasn't going into an ambush unprepared. When my mother knocked on my attic door that night and asked in a careful, brittle voice if I wanted to have a nice family dinner to clear the air, I smiled. "Sure," I replied. "I'd love that." On Saturday I arrived 12 minutes early at the restaurant, carrying a compact USB drive in my purse and a folded-in-half printed transcript of the wedding speech. The hostess showed me to a private room in the back. My parents and sister were already seated. 3 pairs of eyes looked at me with varying degrees of guilt, annoyance, and fear. My father said, "Ava," standing up just enough to appear polite, "You look presentable. I thought you looked just like a man who shouldn't reuse passwords." But I had just taken my seat. After a few minutes of pretended small talk, he got to the point. He slid a manila envelope across the table. "I asked you here because I'm concerned about you," he said in his worried father voice. "You've been emotional since the wedding, saying things to extended family that may jeopardize our reputation. I want us all to move forward." The envelope contained an extremely aggressive non-disclosure agreement. It basically stated that I would never, under any circumstances, speak negatively about him, his company, or internal family business on the risk of being sued for everything I owned. In exchange, he offered me a check for an insulting amount and a temporary rent reduction for the attic. He wanted to buy my silence cheaply. "So, let me get this straight," I said calmly. "You humiliate me in public, call me a mistake into a microphone, and your solution is for me to sign a legal document promising never to speak about it." He shifted in his seat. "It was a joke," he said. "People knew I didn't mean it. You're exaggerating the situation." I pulled the folded transcript from my purse and slid it across the table because this is word for word what you said. My phone recorded it, as did the videographer, and I've backed it up 7 times. I've already shared it with an attorney and a state procurement officer, both of whom believe it demonstrates a pattern of psychological abuse and retaliation. My mother took a deep breath. My sister looked at me as if she had never seen me before, and my father's face changed from pink to a deep, dangerous red. "You what?" he asked. I didn't flinch. "You've been transferring assets to Chloe's name, removing your brother, intimidating city officials, and using my existence as a punchline." I told Dad. "You made 4 mistakes. The first was underestimating my ability to pay attention. The second was assuming that I would never fight back. And the third," I pulled the compact USB drive from my purse and placed it on the table, "was leaving a trail." He didn't touch it. "What's on that?" he asked tightly. "That's enough," I said. "Enough emails, contracts, side agreements, enough to make some very serious people very interested in how Bennett Civic Systems does business." The room went silent except for the noise of the restaurant outside. Finally, my sister spoke, her voice thin. "You're going to destroy us," she whispered. "You're going to destroy everything he built." I looked at her. As I walked out of the restaurant, my father's voice followed me. "Ava, don't you dare do anything you can't undo." I stood up, leaving the NDA untouched, and said, "You invited me here to bring me back in line. Consider this my official notice that I've stepped off the line completely." I didn't look back. "You should have thought of that before you grabbed the microphone," I called over my shoulder. "If your family sat you down, smiled, and slid an NDA across the table to silence you, would you sign for the sake of peace, or would you walk away and make them afraid of what you might do next?" The fallout from the family dinner came quickly. My father stopped communicating with me entirely. My mother's texts became clipped, neutral messages about mail and utilities, but it was my sister, Chloe Bennett, who surprised me. 3 days after the dinner she called and asked, "Can we talk?" she inquired, her voice small. We met, not at a cafe like in some cliché movie, but at the climbing gym where I usually go to get out of my own head. On weekdays, it was mostly empty, and we sat on the crash mats under a wall of brightly colored holds, while a pop playlist hummed in the background. Chloe looked out of place in her designer leggings and pristine sneakers. "You picked an interesting battleground," she said, looking up at the wall. "You picked a convenient time to remember I exist, I told you." She winced. "Okay, I deserve that." For a moment, we just sat there, two women who shared DNA and almost nothing else. Chloe was everything my parents bragged about. Polished, agreeable, the perfect marketing director for my father's company. Whereas I was the one who broke things for a living and told people where their security failed. She blurted, "I didn't know he was going to say that at the wedding, and I wouldn't have let him." "You laughed," I said, looking directly at me. She flushed. I panicked. Okay, everyone was staring at me. It was my wedding night, and he was drunk, so I figured if I made it seem like a joke, it wouldn't be so bad. I asked, "How did that work out? Does it feel less awful now?" She swallowed hard. "No, a beat. But Ava, talking to lawyers and state offices is going too far." I took a printout from my bag, not of my father's speech this time, but of the shareholder registry I had discovered, and tapped the line with her initials. "He gave you 30% of the company," I said, "and he tricked me into signing away my rights by claiming it was standard paperwork. You want to talk about going too far?" She stared at the paper, her face drained of color. "I didn't know about this," she whispered. "He told me you weren't interested in the business. You said you didn't want anything from him." I said I didn't want to be his employee, but I never said I didn't want a father. She looked up at me, her eyes shining, and said, "He paid for my wedding, grad school, and when I didn't get that first promotion, he created a position for me. I assumed he was simply being supportive. He was buying your loyalty," I said gently, "and punishing me for not being viable." She hugged herself and asked, "So what now? You burn everything down, and call it justice." "I don't want you to be homeless, Chloe, and I don't want you to be punished for things you didn't know, but I'm tired of allowing him to hurt people and hide behind family members. The city deserves to know if his systems are unsafe. His employees deserve to know why your uncle vanished. And I do not deserve to be labeled a mistake by the man who created me. He's still our dad," she said desperately. "And he's the only one we have." "No," I said quietly. "He is the only father we have by blood, which is not the same thing." We sat in silence for a while, listening to someone fall off a root and land on the mat with a soft thud before Chloe spoke again. "If you go through with this," she said, "he'll come for you legally, emotionally, whatever he can. He'll say you're unstable. And he'll tell everyone this is because you're jealous of me." I said, "He's been saying that all my life. But this time I have receipts." She nodded slowly, then stood. "I can't help you," she said, "not openly. I owe him too much, and he could ruin my career." She hesitated. "But Mom has been hiding things too. Bank statements, letters from the city. She keeps them in a locked drawer in her office at the district building. If you want to know how deep this goes, that is where I would start." I stared at her. "Why are you telling me this if you're not on my side?" She gave a sad little smile. "I didn't say I wasn't on your side," she said. "But I can't look like I am." As she walked away, I realized the golden child was not as blind as I had assumed, but rather more entangled. If your sibling told you they couldn't stand with you in public but quietly handed you the key to the next secret, would you despise them for their cowardice or accept it as the only courage they could muster? My mother, Karen Bennett, had spent her career in education, and by the time all of this happened, she was an assistant superintendent for the school district, polished, diplomatic, and very good at pretending problems didn't exist if admitting them would upset the balance. Her office was on the third floor of a bland administrative building near downtown. I'd been there a few times as a teenager to drop off forgotten lunches, but never to confront her as an adult. I called and asked if we could talk. "I am busy," she said automatically, then sighed. "Come by at 3:45. We'll have a few minutes before my board prep." At 3:45 p.m., I walked past the receptionist, up the elevator, and down the hall lined with student artwork and motivational posters. My mother's door was half closed, so I knocked and stepped inside. She looked smaller behind the big desk than she did at home, and her professional mask slipped slightly when she saw me. Ava said, "This is not a good time." There's never a good time to admit your husband may be a criminal," I said, closing the door behind me. "We should get started anyway." Her eyes flashed. "Watch your tone," she snapped, then quietly asked, "What do you want?" I sat down without being invited. I spoke with Chloe, who told me that you keep financial documents in a locked drawer, statements, letters from the city, and anything else you don't want Dad to know you have. My mother's hand moved so quickly toward the drawer that it was almost comical. She had no right. "You had no right to stand there at that wedding and let him call me a mistake," I interjected. "You had no right to help him hide money, kick people out, and pretend you didn't know because it kept the house clean and the vacations paid for." She slumped back. The fight drained from her shoulders, and for the first time, she appeared tired and old. "You don't understand the position I'm in," she said. "He controls everything. The house, the retirement accounts, your tuition, Chloe's. If I push too hard, he threatens to cut us off, to leave and take everything. Do you know what it's like to build your entire life around someone who can ruin you with a single signature? Do you know what it's like to grow up in that house?" I responded, learning that love is conditional, and humiliation is only a joke. After a long moment of silence, my mother whispered, "Open the drawer." I paused. "What?" "Open it," she repeated, her voice flat. "If you're going to tear this apart, you might as well see the whole mess." I walked around the desk. She unlocked the drawer with a small silver key and slid it open. Inside were neatly labeled folders: House Refi 2019, College Funds, Bennett Civic Systems, Miss C. I pulled out the last one, which contained copies of letters from the city procurement office raising serious questions about billing discrepancies, as well as a warning notice about potential contract suspension if the issues were not resolved. A handwritten note in my father's unmistakable scroll said, "Don't worry, I'll handle this." The dates on the bank statements that showed large transfers from business accounts into a trust in my sister's name and withdrawals from what was supposed to be a college fund in my name corresponded to significant family emergencies. "You co-signed these?" My mother's signature sat next to my father's on several documents. "He said we'd put it back," she whispered. "He said it was temporary." "And you got your cybersecurity scholarship," I thought. Her voice trailed off. It was easier not to think at all. I flipped to the back of the folder and froze. There, stapled to a letter from the city, was a copy of my own waiver, which I had signed at graduation. The attached note from my father to my mother read, "Once this is signed, she's off the table legally. Focus on H's stake. She is the future." My mother appeared to be sick. "I hadn't seen that note before," she whispered. "He didn't show me everything." "But you saw enough," I said softly, "to know you were choosing him over me." Her eyes welled up with tears, which she wiped away angrily. "Do you think I had real choices, Ava?" she inquired. "I married him at the age of 21. I did not complete my degree until you were in early high school. He had complete control over the finances, including the mortgage and retirement plans. If I left, where was I supposed to go? How was I supposed to care for you? You were supposed to stop him from tearing me down whenever he got bored, and I told you to draw a line somewhere. Even if you couldn't leave, you could have said, 'Not my child.' Instead, you locked the evidence in a drawer and hoped it would vanish." She sighed. "What are you going to do with this?" she inquired, nodding to the file in my hands. "I already have a meeting with the state compliance officer," I said. "Natalie believes there is a strong whistleblower case, and this folder only strengthens it." My mother stared at the window behind me, her eyes unfocused. "He will lose everything," she said, "including the contracts, the company, and possibly even his freedom." "He should have thought of that before he decided laws were for other people," I said. "And before he decided his daughter was disposable." She swallowed. "If I give you my own statement," she said slowly, "if I admit what I've seen, maybe it will show that I'm cooperating, and maybe they'll go easier on me." "Maybe," I said. "I can't promise anything, but it will reveal the truth that he didn't just make mistakes. He made repeated decisions." For the first time, my mother looked directly at me, as if she recognized the adult I'd become rather than the child she'd failed. "I am so sorry, Ava," she said, her voice breaking. Sorry isn't a time machine, I explained. But if you mean it, you'll back it up in writing. That night in my attic, I added my mother's documents to the growing digital case file and typed up a summary of what she'd told me, with each keystroke feeling like hammering another nail into the coffin of the life we'd pretended was normal. If you discovered that your parents had ignored your pain for years because it was easier than losing their lifestyle, and now they wanted your help to save themselves, would you close the drawer and walk away, or would you use what they handed you to finally force the truth into the open? 10 weeks after my father stood up at my sister's wedding and called me a mistake, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating on my desk. It was a Tuesday, and I was in the middle of a hospital phishing awareness training when my bag began to slide across the floor due to the constant buzzing. During the break, I checked the screen, and there were dozens of missed calls from Mom, Dad, Chloe, and relatives I barely spoke with. Our family group chat was on fire. Messages flew by. What did you do to us? They've frozen the accounts. Call your father right now. A news alert popped up, stating that the city had suspended contracts with Bennett Civic Systems pending a fraud investigation, and it included a photo of my father in a suit, jaw tight, heading into the state attorney general's office. The quiet whistleblower meeting I'd had weeks before with Natalie by my side and Ethan Caldwell across the table had turned into a full-blown storm. I'd given them everything: emails, contracts, billing patterns, safety letters, bank statements, my uncle's documents, my mother's files, the waiver, and the wedding recording. They hadn't promised anything, just said, "We'll investigate." Clearly, they had. In the stairwell, I checked voicemail. My father's message arrived first, furious. They raided the office, stole the servers, and the bank froze our accounts. You've destroyed your own family because you couldn't take a joke. Delete. My mother was in tears, begging me to tell investigators that I forced her to open that drawer. Chloe's voice shook as she talked about the frozen trust, the condo down payment, and reporters calling her office. I know you spoke with them. Please call me back. I need to understand. I simply held the phone and breathed. This was the cost of unraveling every thread. My father requested a meeting through counsel, and we ended up in a small conference room at his lawyer's office, with him and his attorney on one side and Natalie and I on the other. He appeared older, the edges of his confidence fraying. You did this? You turned a family dispute into a criminal case, he said. I looked him in the eyes and said, this isn't about hurt feelings. It's about fraud, bribery, falsified safety reports, and using family as a cover. The speech only made it easier for me to stop pretending. He tried to make me feel guilty about my mother's situation, my sister's frozen trust, and the collapsing company. In every story I tell, you'll be the ungrateful daughter who betrayed us. I shrugged. You've always told a twisted version of me, but now I have my own story and evidence. In the end, he accepted a plea bargain. The charges were serious: fraud, bribery, and falsifying safety reports. He was still sentenced to prison, but for fewer years than he could have. Bennett Civic Systems lost city contracts, so Uncle Jack negotiated to buy a small, clean piece of the business with heavy oversight. My mother cooperated fully, avoiding charges, but had to quietly resign from her school district job and relocate to a smaller space. Chloe walked into my climbing gym in an old t-shirt and rental shoes, saying, I read the reports, all of them, and you were right. She began therapy, finally trying to figure out why she had stayed silent for so long. She had lost her condo and a significant portion of her financial safety net. I didn't need to be right, I replied. I needed to be believed. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was more than the silence I grew up with. I moved out of the attic and into a small apartment with too much light and no ghosts. I kept my hospital cybersecurity job, but started assisting whistleblowers in securing their digital evidence on the side. People sometimes ask if I regret it, if I'd go back and keep my mouth shut to keep the family together, and here's the truth. I don't play his entire speech because he doesn't have that kind of space in my life anymore. The wedding recording became a short clip in a training about how emotional abuse and financial crime frequently coexist in the same house. Fear, favoritism, and money kept my family apart. Blowing the whistle did not break something whole. Rather, it shattered an illusion. Respect, which could have made us a family, was missing long before investigators got involved. Self-respect was the first family I chose. So now I'll ask you, if standing up for yourself meant losing the people who taught you to stay small, but gaining a life where you can finally breathe, would you do it? And if you've ever been treated like the mistake in your own family, what would your version of truly choosing yourself look like? My sister got private school, Europe trips at 19. I got $75. At family dinner, she learned I bought a Tribeca penthouse. Dad dropped his fork. She stormed out. Growing up, I learned to minimize my own size. Not physically, but in every other manner that counted. My sister Madeline, Maddie Pierce, had a presence that filled entire rooms, and our parents seemed pleased to let her take up every possible inch of space in our household. I was the oldest daughter by 4 years, but you wouldn't have known it from the way things worked in our family. Madeline attended Westminster Academy, a private institution where tuition exceeded most people's annual salaries. Meanwhile, I walked to the public high school in suburban New Jersey, which was 8 blocks from our house. She spent her spring vacation in the Bahamas and summers in Europe. During those same months, I worked at the local library, stacking books and assisting people in finding what they needed. When she reached 19, our father gave her a beautiful new BMW convertible wrapped in a huge red ribbon. For my 19th birthday, I received a cake and a card with $75. The difference was never explained. Dad worked as a senior partner at a commercial real estate business, and Mom received a large trust from her family. Money wasn't the issue. The issue, as far as I could see, was that Madeline was the golden kid, and I was not. I stopped asking why long ago. When I asked why, I received vague reasons like Madeline requiring certain experiences or having specific qualities that needed to be developed. Mom would stroke my shoulder and remark something about how independent I was and never required much assistance, as if my self-sufficiency was a blessing rather than a requirement they had imposed on me. The pattern established itself early on. When I was 14, Madeline was 10, and I wanted to begin piano lessons. Several of my friends were learning, and I was fascinated to the concept of making music. Mom said we'd see, which I well knew meant no. 3 months later, Madeline said that she'd want to try piano, and the next week, a baby grand appeared in our living room. A private tutor visited the residence 3 times a week. Madeline remained with it for precisely 5 months before calling it uninteresting and switching to horseback riding. The piano then collected dust. I taught myself to play by watching YouTube videos and practiced only when no one else was there since I didn't want to draw notice to my actions. It was embarrassing to want something my parents had bought for Madeline but would not provide for me. So I learnt in secret, my fingers finding the keys in the empty home and producing tunes no one else heard. High school offered more of the same. Madeline went to Westminster Academy, where the girls wore uniforms with the school emblem and carried beautiful leather purses. The campus resembled something from a movie. All of the structures are masonry and the grounds are groomed. Meanwhile, I walked Jefferson. Public highs congested corridors, where lockers were jammed and the cafeteria smelled of industrial cleaner and rotten food. I assured myself everything was good. Jefferson had excellent instructors, and I learned just as much as Madeline did at her rich private school. However, there were times when the discrepancy ached in ways I couldn't ignore. Parent-teacher conferences were the perfect illustration. Mom and Dad would set out entire nights to attend Madeline's conferences at Westminster, frequently taking her out to dinner afterwards. My conferences were scheduled during lunch breaks, and they were brief 15-minute sessions in which my parents asked just the most basic questions before returning to their jobs. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Elaine Whitaker, observed. She was a smart woman in her 50s who appeared to notice more than most people did. During my junior year, she summoned me to her office to discuss college applications. She reviewed my transcript and stated, "You have excellent grades. Top 7% of your class, excellent exam scores, and active extracurriculars. You are going to have alternatives." I informed her that I was mostly looking at state schools. Reuters has a strong reputation, and in-state tuition makes sense. Mrs. Elaine Whitaker observed me throughout her reading lessons. "You may aspire higher than that. With your academic background, you may apply to Ivy League colleges. Some of them provide great financial help packages." My parents would not complete out the financial assistance paperwork, I stated plainly. They make too much money for me to qualify for need-based aid, yet they have made it apparent that they will not contribute to my education. Her look changed from interest to anxiety. "Did they tell you that directly?" "Not in that many words. However, my sister attends private school, takes luxurious trips, and my parents openly discuss giving her full tuition at whichever institution she chooses. When I mention college to myself, the discussion shifts. They discuss the importance of public schools and being financially prudent. The message is obvious enough. Mrs. Elaine Whitaker tapped her pen on her desk. "How about merit scholarships?" "That is the strategy," I verified. I am applying to institutions where my scores place me in the top tier of applicants. Hopefully, this converts into scholarship money. She whispered gently. You should not have to do this alone. But I do, I said. So I will. She assisted me in researching scholarship opportunities and developing my application strategy. Thanks to her advice, I applied to 14 colleges with excellent merit assistance programs. When the admission letters arrived in the spring, I had a variety of alternatives. Rutgers provided a full ride, including tuition, housing and board. I agreed immediately. My parents took Madeline and I out to supper to celebrate our college acceptances. Madeline was on her way to Sarah Lawrence, where the annual tuition cost more than $74,000. My full scholarship at Rutgers was mentioned lightly, almost as a footnote. Dad mumbled something about being delighted I had discovered a cheap choice, utterly missing the comedy of the situation. So I learned how to provide for myself. I worked throughout high school, saved what I could, and received a full academic scholarship to Rutgers. Madeline attended Sarah Lawrence College at full pay. Naturally, while she studied poetry and spent semesters abroad, I double majored in business and computer technology, graduating in Los Angeles. I started working for a financial company in Manhattan soon after graduation, living in a small studio apartment in Queens and riding the train to work every day. Madeline returned home after graduation. She discussed becoming a creative director or launching a lifestyle blog. Our parents encouraged her adventures both emotionally and financially. The difference between our post-college lifestyles could not have been more pronounced. While Madeline slept in her childhood bedroom and spent her days capturing Instagram-worthy images, I was catching the metro at 5:45 a.m. to avoid the morning rush. My studio apartment in Queens was about the size of Madeline's walk-in closet at home. The bathroom window viewed a brick wall, and my neighbors fought so loudly that I learned to sleep with earplugs. But I was developing something. Tech Best Solutions, a finance business, was modest yet ambitious. 3 MIT grads founded the company after identifying inefficiencies in major financial institutions' trading platforms. They need someone who knew both the technical aspects and the commercial applications. My double major made me an ideal fit. I started as a junior analyst, but in a startup atmosphere, everyone wears numerous jobs. Within 8 months, I was developing algorithms, attending customer presentations, and collaborating directly with our technical team to improve the program. The hours were harsh, the strain was unrelenting, but I was learning at a rapid speed. My first year at TechVest, I returned home for Christmas. Madeline had recently started seeing someone she met at a gallery opening, a trust fund beneficiary who worked part-time for his father's commercial real estate business. She spent supper recounting their previous vacation to Aspen, including images of herself on the slopes dressed in fancy ski gear. "And how about you?" Mom inquired, looking to me with polite attention. "How is your employment going?" "Really well," I said. "We just signed 2 new clients, and I'm leading the integration process for one of them." "That's nice, dear," Mom said. But her focus had already shifted back to Madeline, who was showing Dad something on her phone. Aunt Vivian Mercer, who had joined us for the holiday, bent down to speak gently. "Tell me more about what you are working on. It sounds complicated." I presented the fundamentals of algorithmic trading and how we were assisting institutions in executing trades more effectively and reducing risk through improved data analysis. Vivian listened closely, asking insightful questions and seemed genuinely interested in my responses. She replied, "You're doing important work," when I concluded. "Don't let anyone convince you differently." Her approval mattered more than she probably imagined. In a home where my successes were continuously overlooked, having someone recognize my efforts seemed like a welcome relief after a lengthy dry spell. The startup culture was tough, yet rewarding. Our CEO, Gavin Harper, was both tough and fair. He pushed all of us to perform at our best, but he also acknowledged talent and celebrated accomplishment. After 20 months, he elevated me to senior analyst and awarded me a modest stock part in the firm. "You're one of the best hires we've made," Gavin said during my evaluation. "You work harder than anybody else here, and your insights have been critical to our development. This equity is only the beginning." I didn't completely comprehend what equity meant at the time. Startup shares appeared to be speculative, with the prospect for a future reward that may never materialize. So I continued to live frugally, saving the majority of my income and investing what I could in index funds. Meanwhile, Madeline's romance with her trust fund lover deteriorated. She tried her hand at working for a fashion PR business but left after 3 months because the hours were excessive. Then she tried to start a lifestyle blog promoting sustainable luxury, which our parents eagerly supported. The blog garnered around 50 followers, the majority of whom were family friends who felt bound to offer their support. After 8 months, she also abandoned the endeavor. Each time I came home, I saw my parents concerned about Madeline's struggle to find direction, never admitting that their ongoing financial support may be contributing to her lack of desire. Why would she push herself when she could be comfortable and secure regardless of her decisions? 4 years into my tenure at TechFest, Gavin convened an all-hands meeting. Several large investment firms had expressed interest in the enterprise. After months of discussions, they decided to go public with the firm. The IPO was set for the following spring. My pulse raced as Gavin described what this meant for employees with equity. Our shares, which were previously theoretical, would become actual, trading assets. The predicted valuation placed my share between $900,000 and $1.35 million, depending on how the market responded. I sat in that conference room, surrounded by coworkers who were already celebrating, and something changed inside of me. It was actual money. Money may change someone's life. The type of money that can purchase independence, security, and options. I still haven't told anyone in my family. The IPO was still months away, and anything might happen. Markets might tumble. Valuations might drop. The whole thing might come apart. But, more importantly, I had learned not to discuss my hopes with those who had never expressed interest in my ambitions. The IPO occurred on a Tuesday in April. I took the day off work and watched the opening bell from my flat, with my laptop resting on my knees. The TechBest stock symbol debuted on the ticker. The price rose steadily throughout the morning, outperforming even Gavin's bullish forecasts. My stock investment was worth somewhat more than $1.25 million at the time of closure. After taxes, I would receive around $780,000. Combined with my savings and investments over the last 4 years, I had over $920,000 in liquid assets. I was 27 years old and, by any fair standard, affluent. The first thing I did was contact my financial advisor, Marianne Keller, whom I had begun dealing with 8 months prior. Marianne was in her 50s, amazing with mathematics, and refreshingly open about money. "Congratulations," she murmured with warmth. "How do you feel?" "Overwhelmed," I acknowledged, unsure of what to do next. Marianne advised me that the first rule of sudden fortune is to do nothing immediately. Let the dust settle. Allow the reality to sink in. Do not make any major decisions for at least 4 months. I took her counsel. I continued to live in my small studio apartment, use the metro, and eat the same foods I had always eaten. Externally, nothing had changed. Internally, everything had changed. I was no longer concerned about unanticipated bills or if I could afford to replace my outdated laptop. The continual low-level concern about money that had persisted in my life for years just vanished. After 4 months, I encountered Marianne again. "I'm ready to start planning," I informed her. We talked about financial methods, tax optimization, and retirement funds. Marianne assisted me in creating a thorough financial strategy that would allow my money to increase while giving stability for the future. She also advised that I consider what I wanted out of life outside financial stability. "You've been in survival mode for years," she said. "You've worked hard, saved carefully, and denied yourself necessities that would have made life easier. You can make various decisions right now." That talk sowed a seed. What did I want? What would make my life more enjoyable, richer, and fulfilling? The solution occurred to me one Saturday afternoon while walking around Tribeca. I had come to Manhattan to see Sophie Bennett for brunch, but I made a detour through an area I had long adored. The streets were tree-lined and picturesque, the buildings stylish and well-kept. The bottom levels were filled by boutiques and cafes, and enormous windows provided glimpses of gorgeous lofts. I passed a real estate business with listings visible in the window. One stood out to me right away. A penthouse with 2 bedrooms, a wraparound terrace, floor-to-ceiling windows, and views of the Hudson River. The price was reported as $1.95 million. 8 months ago, I would have scoffed at the idea of looking at such a listing. But standing there on that lovely afternoon, I knew I could afford it. It's not comfortable. It would require the majority of my liquid assets and a small mortgage, but it was within reach. I pushed open the door to the real estate office before I could reason myself out of it. The closing procedure took many months, including house inspections, financial verifications, and haggling over minor fixes. The seller was an investment banker heading to London, and he was quite particular about every aspect. I engaged a real estate lawyer, took out a modest mortgage to cover the amount I couldn't pay with cash assets, and negotiated the complicated world of New York City real estate transactions. Throughout it all, I remained silent with my family. Madeline had lately revealed that she was considering pursuing a master's degree in arts administration, which would cost $65,000 and provide unclear professional rewards. My parents were debating whether to totally fund it or have her take out some loans. The discussion dominated numerous family dinners I attended. Nobody inquired what was going on in my life. Nobody questioned why I appeared distracted, or why I was making numerous phone calls to my attorney. I'd become so used to being disregarded that their lack of inquiry no longer astonished me. The shutdown occurred on a Friday in September. I sat in a conference room with my attorney, the seller's attorney, and a title company representative, signing more paperwork than I was aware existed. After the final signing was completed, the seller's attorney handed me a set of keys. "Congratulations," she responded, smiling. "You're now the owner of a beautiful piece of New York City real estate." I felt the keys in my palm. They symbolized far more than just access to an apartment. They represented years of hard work, numerous sacrifices, and a commitment to live my life on my own terms, despite the fact that I had no support from those who should have helped me the most. The purchase needed meticulous financial preparation. I used a large portion of my cash assets to make a down payment and took out a small mortgage to cover the rest. Marianne Keller assisted me in structuring it in a way that made sense, leaving adequate financial reserves for furnishings and emergencies, while yet reaching my aim of purchasing the penthouse. Moving day was crazy. I had hired movers to carry my belongings from the Queen's flat. Although I didn't own anything worth moving, the most of my furniture was inexpensive and old. I decided to start again, purchasing new things that truly matched the room and showed my style rather than my financial constraints. Sophie came over the day after I moved in, bringing champagne and takeout from an upscale Japanese restaurant. We sat on the patio as the sun fell and watched the light shift over the river. "This is incredible," she said, nodding toward the view. "You accomplished this all on your own. That is wonderful." "It feels surreal," I said. "Like I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a dream." "It's not a fantasy," Sophie informed me. "It's what happens when ability meets chance, and you're clever enough to take advantage of it. You earned this." We drank to fresh beginnings, and I felt a feeling of calm I hadn't had in years. This spot was mine. Nobody had handed it to me. Nobody could take it away. Nobody's perspective on it mattered but myself. The weeks after moving in were hectic. I gradually equipped the flat, selecting each piece carefully. I wanted the room to be smart, yet comfortable, reflecting who I had become rather than where I had come from. A gray sectional couch for the living room, a dining table that could seat 8, artwork from local galleries that appealed to me, and plants that added vitality to the sun-drenched spaces. Work continued to go smoothly. TechBest had swiftly expanded following its initial public offering, and I had been elevated to Director of Client Solutions. The position came with more responsibilities and a significant pay bump. I was traveling more, interacting with executives from large financial institutions, and establishing a reputation as someone capable of solving complicated challenges. My personal life stayed quiet. I dated sometimes, but nothing significant ever happened. Most guys were either scared by my professional achievement or resented my financial independence. I decided I'd rather be alone than compromise who I'd become to make others happy. Aunt Vivian Mercer was the only family member I had close touch with. We would meet for lunch every couple weeks, generally at a place near her midtown office. She worked as a literary agent and had a successful career representing authors. During one of our meals, she inquired if I had informed my parents about the new apartment yet. "No," I answered simply. "Why not?" Vivian inquired, but her tone indicated that she already knew the answer. "Because they never ask," I explained. "They periodically call to inform me about Madeline's latest plans or to discuss a family event, but they never ask me about my life in any meaningful way. Why should I volunteer information that they plainly do not care about?" Vivian sighed. "You know they care about you. They're just terrible at displaying it." "Caring about someone means demonstrating interest in their life," I told them. "It entails asking questions and listening to responses. It entails acknowledging accomplishments and providing support during difficult times. My parents have not done any of these things for me. They established a relationship in which Madeline is the star and I am the supporting player, expecting to be grateful for the odd shred of attention." "You're not wrong," Vivian acknowledged. "I've watched it happen for years, and I've called them out on it more than once. but they don't seem to understand what they're doing. Then maybe it's time they found out, I said. That chat took place 1 month before Grandma Eleanor Caldwell's birthday dinner. Grandma Eleanor turned 87 in October, a little more than 14 months after I moved into the penthouse. Mom planned a meal at her favorite restaurant, an upmarket Italian establishment in Montclair where the waitstaff knew her by name. The entire family was anticipated to attend. I traveled in from the city on Saturday afternoon, dressed in a modest black dress, and arrived right on time. Madeline was already at the table, dressed in a designer clothing I recognized from a recent fashion magazine. She was discussing her recent vacation to Napa Valley, describing wine tastings at Michelin-starred restaurants with the zest of someone who has never had to check a price tag. Mom and Dad listened intently to everything she said. Grandma Eleanor smiled indulgently as she sat at the head of the table. I sat in the empty chair across from my Aunt Vivian, Mom's younger sister. Aunt Vivian Mercer had always been different from the rest of the family, more perceptive and less impressed by superficial things. She gave me a real grin and inquired how I was doing. I said that I was busy with work. But it's good, truly. Still working for that IT company? She asked. The same one. It has been an excellent experience. Madeline looked over, suddenly realizing my presence. Working such long hours must be quite stressful. Aren't you tired of the grind? I smiled blandly. I enjoy what I do. That's good, Mom said. We are concerned that you will burn out due to your excessive workload. I take care of myself, I told her. Dad signaled the waiter to bring wine. The discourse shifted to other issues. Grandma Eleanor Caldwell's garden, a cousin's impending wedding, and some drama at the country club. I contributed when asked, but largely watched, as I usually did. Dinner has come. We ate pasta and shared dishes like chicken piccata and veal marsala. Grandma Eleanor told stories about her childhood in Brooklyn, and everyone laughed at the right times. It was a pleasant family gathering, the kind I'd attended dozens of times before. Then, as dessert was served, Aunt Vivian looked at me with curiosity. I ran into Lydia Prescott last week, she explained. She mentioned seeing you leave that beautiful building in Tribeca with the doorman and the glass facade. I didn't realize you had moved to that neighborhood. The table became silent. Every head turned to face me. Oh, I replied casually, setting down my fork. Yes, I moved around 14 months ago. Have you moved? Mom's eyebrows rose. You didn't tell us you were relocating. It didn't seem like a big deal, I said. I just wanted a change of scenery. Madeline leaned forward, her expression sharp with interest. Try Tessa. That area is extremely expensive. What kind of accommodation did you get? I took a sip of water and considered how much to share. A penthouse with 2 bedrooms and nice views. The silence that ensued was profound. Dad's fork clattered on his plate. Mom's mouth opened slightly before closing again. Madeline stared at me as if I had suddenly begun speaking a foreign language. A penthouse? Madeline's voice went up an octave. In Tribeca? Do you have any idea how much they cost? I am aware of the price, I said mildly. That's why I looked for months before making an offer. How? Mom appeared to be struggling with basic speech. How did you afford something like that? I mentioned that I've been working for nearly 9 years and that my company went public a while ago. My stock options did extremely well. Dad discovered his voice. Stock options. How well are we communicating? I said I had enough money to make a substantial down payment. I have a mortgage, but it's easily manageable given my current income. Madeline's face had turned red. This is ridiculous. You bought a penthouse without informing anyone? Without even mentioning that you had that much money? You never asked, I replied simply. We are your family. Madeline stood abruptly, her voice becoming so loud that other diners looked over. Her chair scraped against the floor. You don't simply hide something like this. I wasn't hiding anything, I clarified. I simply did not announce it. There is a distinction. Madeline grabbed her purse from the back of her chair, her hands trembling. Tears had begun to form in her eyes, but I couldn't tell whether they were from anger or hurt. This is unbelievable, she exclaimed, her voice breaking slightly. Simply unbelievable. She turned and walked quickly toward the restaurant's entrance, unconcerned about the restroom or maintaining her composure. Within moments, she had vanished through the front door. Mom rose halfway from her seat, clearly torn between following Madeline and remaining at the table. Grandma Eleanor watched the exchange with interest, a slight smile on her lips. Aunt Vivian appeared ecstatic, though she tried to hide it behind her wine glass. Mom reached across the table to me. "Sweetheart, we only wish you had told us. We could have helped you and given you advice." I had advisors, so I interrupted gently. Financial planners, real estate attorneys, and the entire team. I was cautious about my decision. "But we are your parents," Dad continued, and he sounded pained. "We should have taken part in this." I stared at him immediately. "When have you ever been involved in my financial decisions? You did not assist me pay for college. You did not contribute to my living expenditures when I relocated to the city. You never inquired what I needed or how I was doing. I learned how to manage money on my own, because I had to." The truth hung in the air, unmistakable and unsettling. Mom sat back down slowly, visibly shaken. "I suppose we did let you work things out on your own," she confessed gently. Aunt Vivian selected that time to speak, and her voice slashed through the tension like a scalpel through butter. "Do you know what interests me?" She spoke while staring at the vacant chair where Madeline had been sitting. "Your sister purchased a condominium in one of Manhattan's most expensive areas entirely on her own merit, and instead of being pleased or glad for her, the initial reaction was anger and inquiry. Why is that?" The question remained in the air. Mom and Dad exchanged eyes without saying anything. Vivian continued, her gaze traveling across Mom and Dad. "For years, I've observed this family devote resources to one daughter while the other fends for herself. I've seen you highlight Madeline's substandard successes while ignoring your other daughter's true achievements. And now that she has exceeded all realistic expectations, you are all behaving as if she did something wrong by failing to keep you informed." Mom looked distraught. "Vivian, that is not fair." "Is not it?" Vivian challenged. "When was the last time somebody inquired about her work? Her life? When was the last time you provided assistance or support without being asked? This youngster paid her own way through college, established a profession, and purchased real estate in Manhattan. That should be praised, not investigated." The hush that ensued was deafening. Other diners had clearly seen the hubbub, but I found myself unconcerned. Something inside of me felt lighter than it had in years. Grandmother Eleanor cleared her throat. Everyone turned to gaze at her, the family matriarch, awaiting her decision on the problem. She said, "I'm proud of you," gazing directly at me. "I'm proud of you for learning to stand on your own. I'm proud of you for not waiting for handouts or playing the victim. You spotted what you wanted and worked hard to get it. That requires character." She turned to see the vacant chair where Madeline had been seated, and her countenance tightened slightly. "Your other daughter has received everything and appreciated nothing. Your sister's achievement does not constitute an assault on her. It merely shows that hard work pays off." She returned my gaze with kind eyes. "I've always knew you were exceptional. I'm simply thrilled everyone else is seeing it too." Dad looked between me and Grandma Eleanor, obviously wondering how to proceed. "I don't believe we intended for things to be that uneven," he replied eventually. "We just believed Madeline needed additional help." "You felt she needed more help," I remarked gently. "So you showed her extra support. That was your decision. But you don't have to be astonished that I learned to sustain myself, nor do you have to be offended that I didn't involve you in the prosperity that emerged from that self-sufficiency." He nodded slowly, appearing older somehow. "You're correct. We made errors. You did, and I agreed. But I'm no longer furious. I stopped getting furious when I realized your favoritism harmed you more than it did me. You allowed Madeline to grow reliant and entitled. You taught her that everything would be provided to her. But you taught me resilience, even if it wasn't your purpose." Mom looked to the restaurant entrance where Madeline had vanished, and then back at me. She departed. She contacted the car service and returned home. Mom mentioned something unnecessary. "She's very upset." Aunt Vivian Mercer explained that she is unhappy because her worldview has been questioned. She thought she was unique, favored, and destined for tremendous success. Finding out that her sister has quietly overtaken her has pushed her to face reality. "That seemed cruel," Mom objected weakly. "Vivian said that reality is frequently the case. But it is necessary." The dinner ended uncomfortably. We ate birthday cake and sung to Grandma Eleanor Caldwell, but the enthusiasm was faded. When it was time to depart, Mom held me passionately and murmured, "We are so proud of you." "I'm sorry we didn't say it enough." I embraced her back, feeling torn. "Thank you. Dad shook my hand formally and strangely. I'd want to see the new place sometime if you're prepared to show us around. Maybe, I said noncommittally. Aunt Vivian led me to the car. That was quite the evening, she remarked with a smile. I didn't mean to make a scene, I told her. Oh, please, she said, laughing. That scenario was 32 years in the making. You merely happened to light the match. Furthermore, some families require a good explosion to cleanse the air. I drove back to Manhattan as the sun fell over the skyline, coloring the towers orange and pink. My phone vibrated with messages. Mom asked if we could chat. Dad is sending an article regarding real estate investing. Grandma Eleanor texted simply, "Come visit soon. I want to know everything about your life." Madeline has not contacted me. I did not expect her to. The subsequent weeks were weird. Mom phoned regularly, asking questions about my employment that she had never bothered with before. Dad wanted to talk about financial techniques and portfolio management. They were attempting, in their own awkward way, to close the distance that had always been between us. Madeline kept her radio muted. Mom said she had moved back in with them temporarily and was sorting things out. I felt a pang of something. Not exactly compassion, but certainly not satisfaction. I never intended to hurt my sister. I simply wanted to live my own life without being made to feel inferior. Madeline followed up 4 months after the dinner. She texted me asking if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, interested about what she had to say. We met in a cafe in Midtown, which was familiar ground for both of us. She appeared weary and less polished than usual. We got drinks and sat near the window, watching the folks hurry by on the pavement outside. Madeline eventually said, "I've been thinking a lot about my life and how I've been living." I waited and said nothing. "I was really angry after dinner," she said. "But when I thought about it, I knew Vivian was correct. I've been coasting. I've been waiting for things to happen to me rather than causing them." "Okay," I said gently. She said, "I'm not going to pretend we're suddenly going to be best friends. I know we've never been close, but I wanted to tell you that I understand now. I understand why you kept your accomplishment hidden, and I apologize for causing a scene." It wasn't the ideal apology, but it was real. I could see it in her eyes. "Thank you," I replied. "I appreciate it." "I'm thinking about returning to school," she informed me. "Consider getting a graduate degree in a practical field, such as marketing or business administration. Instead than just talking about it, start working on your career." "That seems like an excellent idea," I said, and I meant it. We spoke for another hour, and the discussion was easier than I had anticipated. We were never going to be the sisters who shared everything and spent every weekend together. There was too much history between us for that. But perhaps we can find a way to be cordial, even nice, in tiny doses. When we left Ways on the street corner, Madeline shocked me by grabbing me for a short embrace. For what it's worth, she stated, "The penthouse is quite spectacular. You should be proud." "I am," I stated simply. She went away toward the train, and I returned to my office building. My life hadn't changed significantly since the meal at Grandma Eleanor's birthday. I still worked hard hours, meticulously handled my finances, and lived in my lovely apartment with sweeping city views. But something had changed inwardly. I had finally put down some of the weight I had been carrying for years. My family recognized who I was now. They were aware of what I had done, not via luck or handouts, but through hard work and sound judgment. They couldn't undo anything, couldn't put me back in the box labeled the other daughter or the self-sufficient one who doesn't require anything. Yes, I had proven something to them, but more significantly, to myself. I had broken away from the position they had assigned me and built a life wholly on my own terms. And that life was rather wonderful. The next month I hosted Thanksgiving at my place. It was the first time my entire family had been inside my home, and watching their expressions as they took in the surroundings gave me a calm contentment. Mom kept stroking the marble surfaces in the kitchen. Dad stood on the patio for 20 minutes, simply marveling at the scenery. Even Madeline appeared to be really astonished, moving from room to room with awe on her face. Grandma Eleanor reclined into the most comfy chair in the living room and proclaimed that she would never leave. Aunt Vivian helped me cook, and we joked in the kitchen as the bird roasted. It wasn't flawless. Family is never perfect, but it was authentic in a way that our previous meetings had never been. Everyone knew where they stood. The illusions had been peeled away, and what left was more genuine, if occasionally painful. As we sat around the table I had picked for myself, in the house I had earned myself, eating food I had cooked myself, I glanced at my family's faces and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite forgiveness. That would require more time. I do not feel like I belong. I'd learned to put myself first, but I was close to finding serenity. Madeline caught my glance across the table and smiled briefly. I grinned back. We were never going to be the sister any of us had hoped for, but maybe, just maybe, we could be honest with each other. And it was enough. At my brother's college party, Dad said, "He'll take the Mustang." I spent 14 months rebuilding it. I said, "Not happening." A week later, the title was gone. So as a 24-year-old boy, I've spent my whole life living in my brother's shadow. My younger brother, 21-year-old Lucas, has always been treated as if he were God's gift to humanity, and I am essentially the invisible kid who no one cares about. It has been like way since we were little. I clearly recall winning first place in the district science fair when I was in 9th school. I spent weeks developing this awesome solar-powered water filtering system. When I returned home with the blue ribbon, my mother just murmured, "That's nice, dear," and returned to assisting Lucas in creating a poster for his social studies assignment, which was due the next day. He received a B- on it, and they treated him to ice cream to commemorate his hard work. Christmas was always a total farce in our household. Lucas' pile of presents would reach the ceiling. All the latest gaming gear, the greatest clothing, and everything else he'd been moaning about for the previous 7 months. My pile consisted of whatever was inexpensive, a flannel shirt if I was lucky, and the rare item that was genuinely beneficial for my endeavor. Mom would say practical presents with a smug smile on her face, as if she earned a medal for purchasing me work gloves while Lucas received a Nintendo. Dad was usually in the backyard with Lucas, teaching him how to toss a football or helping him create scientific projects. I'd be in the garage alone, watching YouTube videos to learn how to fix things since no one had time to teach me. When I asked Dad for help, he always said, "In a minute." A minute that somehow stretched into years. I eventually stopped asking. The golden child BS extended much beyond gifts and attention. Lucas would physically ruin Mom's car and they'd just brush it off. "Accidents happen, honey." I'd arrive home 7 minutes after curfew from working a late shift at the hardware store and be grounded for 3 weeks. Different world, different rules when you're the favored. When we were 17 and 15, Lucas went through a phase when he would borrow my belongings without asking. He once took my iPod to school, back when they were still popular, and some student stole it from his backpack. When I became upset, my parents advised me to be more sympathetic because he is going through a difficult time right now. The bottom line is that he did not make the JV basketball team's first string. They never replaced it, but Lucas received a fresh new one 3 weeks later since he needed music for his exercises. I realized quite quickly that nobody in our house had my back but me. So I shut up, lowered my head, and worked my ass off. I got my first job washing dishes at a greasy, spoon cafe. I saved every penny and began studying skills via YouTube and the old folks at the hardware shop, where I ultimately found work. I didn't need their approval anyhow. My parents had a blind spot that perfectly matched my size and form. They'd remember to get Lucas's favorite cereal but forgot I was sensitive to peanuts. They'd drive 5 hours to witness Lucas's regional baseball game, but couldn't bring themselves to attend my high school graduation since it was such a long event and parking would be a headache. It sounds like I'm making this stuff up, but I promise I'm not. It's as if I'm a supporting role in a bizarre sitcom that no one remembers. Then, oh yeah, there's another kid too. My son. The truth is that Lucas was just as awful as my parents in his own way. He is entitled, greedy, and smug about his status as a golden kid. He repeatedly rubbed it in my face. "Mom said yes to me, but she'd probably say no to you," Dad used to say with a chuckle when I was younger. Or he'd accidentally smash my belongings and then play innocent when I got furious. By the time we reached high school, I had pretty much accepted my place in the family hierarchy. Keep your expectations modest so you do not be disappointed. So I concentrated on things I could control. My grades, occupations, friends and projects. So here comes my grandfather, a 74-year-old man. Grandpa Frank was the only person who ever actually saw me. Ironically, he was my father's father, a former Marine and old-school technician capable of stripping an engine blindfolded if necessary. He was a legend with his hands. While my parents were busy cheering on Lucas's soccer games or fretting over his school performances, I'd be in Grandpa's garage learning how to change oil, replace spark plugs, and eventually rebuild carburetors. Those were the days when I felt like someone cared about me. "You got something special in those hands, boy," he'd say as we worked side by side on whatever beater he was cleaning up. "Your father never had the tolerance for this crap. Always too busy pursuing the next promotion, the next great thing." He shook his head, as if unsure where he went wrong with his kid. Grandpa saw right through my folks' partiality nonsense. My parents once forgot my 16th birthday. Like, I completely forgot. They recalled the day before that Lucas had a swimming competition the next day, and the entire family had to go. My mother remarked, "Oh, it's your birthday tomorrow, isn't it? We'll celebrate next weekend." They didn't even bring me a cake. When Grandpa discovered out, he was furious. He arrived at our place that night with a toolbox covered in newspaper. Inside came a stunning pair of precision screwdrivers that I'd been coveting for months. "Happy birthday, kiddo," he announced loudly enough for my parents to hear from the kitchen. Some are worth celebrating properly. Every Christmas, as I opened my parents' utilitarian gifts, socks, school supplies, etc., Grandpa would slip me something real. Quality tools. Most of it I still use today. One year my folks grumbled about it. My mother had the audacity to comment, "He doesn't need to be spoiled, Frank." As if a nice set was akin to the new iPhone Lucas had just gotten. Grandpa just gazed at her like she was an idiot. "Recognizing talent isn't spoiling. It's investing," he said, winking at me. When I was 19, Grandpa was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Unfortunately, the news is not good. He couldn't drive anymore, so he contacted me one week and said he had something for me. They said it wasn't attractive, but it had nice bones. This was one of his favorite expressions. I drove over to his house, thinking he would be giving me some of his old tools or something. Instead, there was this 1968 Mustang Fastback parked in his driveway, faded Highland green, with more rust than paint, ripped seats, and an engine that made sounds I didn't know a car could make. But holy hell, that was the most stunning sight I'd ever seen. Grandpa handed me the keys and said he had been keeping them for me since I was 13. He said he had seen how my parents treated me over the years and felt I deserved something special. He had intended to fix it himself, but as Parkinson's disease progressed, his hands no longer worked properly. "Your dad never appreciated muscle cars," he added, brushing his fingers over the rusting hood. "But you'll bring her back to life." I'm not going to lie, I had to step away for a moment. I got something in my eye, or whatever. When I drove that rust bucket home, my folks chuckled when they spotted it in the driveway. When I informed my father about it, he didn't even glance up from his phone. Just remarked, "Don't waste your money on that death trap." My father was too preoccupied with this pile of garbage. A pile of junk? Nah. Now I understand what Grandpa was trying to tell me. Mom just grumbled about the oil spots on the concrete. When Lucas saw it, his eyes glowed like Christmas morning. "Wow, that's going to be so badass when it's fixed up," Grandpa exclaimed, despite the fact that he had never shown it to me. And for once, I felt like I possessed something he coveted. He couldn't just complain to our parents about it. For 14 months I dedicated every spare minute to that automobile. Following rent and food, every paycheck was spent on parts. I learned how to weld and repair an engine by watching countless YouTube videos and reading forums. My hands were permanently coated with grease, my fingernails were never totally clean, and my arms were covered in minor burns and scratches. My room was packed with Chilton manuals and wiring diagram printouts. I'd fall asleep thinking about valve timing, then wake up, contemplating bodywork. When things went bad at home, as they always did, I'd go to the garage and bury myself in the restoration. Working on vehicles has an almost meditative quality to it. When you enter the zone, it's just you and the machine. Everything else melts away. I sourced parts from junkyards, swap meetings, and internet forums, rebuilt the 428 V8 piece by piece, sandblasted the body down to bare metal, and meticulously repaired the rust patches, learning to weld and shape metal along the way. I painted in my buddy's uncle's shop after hours. I traded work for booth time, completely reupholstered the inside. The day I finally got that engine to operate properly, hearing the deep rumbling of the V8 come to life, it seemed like everything I'd worked for had finally paid off. The Highland green paint shone in the sunlight. Yes, I choose the bullet color. Sue me. The black leather upholstery smelt like a fresh start. And when I took her for her first real drive, windows down, engine growling, I realized that for the first time in my life, I truly owned something. Something I constructed with my own two hands that no one could claim credit for. She was my success, and no one could take that away from me. Growing up as the overlooked kid teaches you to accept that others don't actually want your goods. Nobody fought over borrowing my clothing or playing with my games, since in their opinion, Lucas always had the superior version. So I was surprised by what happened when, for the first time in my life, I had something worth envying. And wow, Lucas envied that Mustang. So after I had the Mustang operating correctly, Lucas couldn't stop raving about it. Every time I drove it, he'd be at the window, staring like a kid at an ice cream truck. When I pulled in, he'd dash out to the garage. "Can I sit in it for just a minute?" At first, I didn't mind too much. It was good to have someone recognize all of my efforts. My folks didn't care. Dad simply moaned about equipment taking up room in the garage, while Mom continued making passive-aggressive remarks about squandering money rather than investing for a true future, whatever that meant. But then Lucas's request became increasingly bothersome. It changed from, "Can I sit in it?" to, "May I drive it to prom for one night? I'll be very careful." Then it was, "Let me take it to the beach this weekend." My friend would freak if I picked him up in this, he said, his voice full of arrogance. Of course I would say yes, since that is what everyone has always done with Lucas. I always declined, not because I wanted to be a jerk to my brother. I replied no since I knew Lucas. This is the youngster who broke 4 phones in a single year. The child who borrowed his father's costly golf clubs for one afternoon and somehow lost half of the set. The child who never cared about anything since he didn't have to. Something was usually replaced when he broke it. He didn't have to be held accountable for anything since of course my parents had his back. And you think I'm insane for letting him drive my beautifully restored vintage Mustang after witnessing that track record his whole life? Hell no. The anxiety continued building. Lucas would roll his eyes when I declined, saying things like, "It's just a car, dude. You're so crazy anxious. Just an automobile. Just a car." As if I hadn't spent 14 months and every spare cash repairing the darn thing. Then my parents started making these small comments at dinner, like, sharing is part of being a good brother, and that car usually sits in the garage. Anyway, we have a conventional layout at our house. What Lucas wants, he gets. Except this time, I wouldn't budge. My father attempted to guilt trip me one night. "When I was your age, I was often sharing with my brothers. That's what family does." I nearly laughed in his face. This is from the guy who physically hid the excellent food in his office so he wouldn't have to share them with his children. I just answered, "When you were my age, did you rebuild a classic car from the ground up with money you earned while working your ass off in college?" That silenced him for approximately 7 minutes. My mother attempted a different angle. She cornered me in the kitchen one morning, holding her coffee cup and giving me that false worried face. "Honey, I'm afraid about you becoming too tied to material possessions. It's only metal and rubber. Relationships are what count in life." It's interesting that they worry about keeping a solid connection with Lucas. Things came to a head when Lucas was accepted to State University. My parents prepared a huge party and invited everyone they knew. I mean, excellent for him, but State isn't Harvard. It's a respectable institution with a 65% admission rate. But he barely got in due to his terrible grades and Dad's alumni connection, so whatever. I showed up and complimented him. During supper, Dad stood up and revealed that they had a surprise for Lucas. Dad began talking about how Lucas would need transportation to campus, which was approximately 45 minutes away, and then looked directly at me, stating they felt I should allow Lucas use the Mustang while he was at school. The entire table turned to look at me, expecting me to smile and play along as usual. Like I was about to respond, "Sure, take the car. I spent 14 months repairing the one possession I own that meant something to me." "No problem at all." I just answered, "No, that's not happening." They all responded as if I had suggested we sacrifice the family dog. There was dead stillness at the table. Dad attempted to smooth things up by stating we'd talk about it later, but I shut that down as well. I told him there wasn't much to discuss. That was my automobile. This is the end of the narrative. Mom jumped in, telling me not to be selfish, since Lucas needed reliable transportation at this critical period in his life, as if college was somehow more essential than, my entire existence. I ordered them to purchase him a car just like they did with everything else he requested. That's when Dad became enraged, slapped his hand on the table, nearly knocking over the gravy bucket, and claimed I was being foolish about a vehicle. I stepped up and finally spoke what I had been keeping in for years. I told him it was my car, that I rebuilt myself, that I had the title for, that I paid for with my own money, and that I wasn't handing it to Lucas just because he asked for it. I told them that for once in their life, they could say no to their lovely golden kid. He suggested Lucas understand what it's like to struggle for something rather than have everything delivered to him on a silver platter. Mom glanced at me, as if she couldn't believe I was sticking up for myself. Dad looked like he was about to rupture a blood vessel. Lucas merely sat there with that grimace, undoubtedly annoyed that his regular want-what-I-get approach had encountered a stumbling block. I left before anyone could say anything else. The next morning, Dad tried again. He attempted a new approach this time. "Listen, son," he began, as though we were discussing a deal. "I know you've put a lot of work into that automobile. What if we compensated you for this? We could put some money toward another project car for you to work on while Lucas drives the Mustang. He needs it right now." I just chuckled. "You don't understand, do you? It's not about money. I do not want another project vehicle. I want my automobile, which I have previously restored. And don't repeat the phrase 'it's just a car,' because it isn't. It means far more to me than that." Then he attempted to be selfish again. "Lucas has an opportunity here. This has the potential to significantly increase his chances of success. Don't you want the best for your brother?" I was so sick of that line. "How about what is best for me, Dad? Has that ever crossed your mind?" The expression on his face spoke everything I needed to know. It actually hadn't. Things at home remained strained for several weeks. My mother used the quiet treatment, as if I were the one being unreasonable. My father continued making small jabs about team members and family sacrifice. Lucas alternated between pouting and attempting to cheer me up with his unexpected brotherly interest in my life. I simply kept my head down, concentrating on my studies and job. I spent as little time at home as possible. I really considered obtaining my own apartment, despite the fact that rent in our neighborhood was exorbitant. But I began planning. I believed they'd ultimately get over it and get Lucas a car like any other parent would, one that they could afford. But they didn't want to, since why invest money when they could get my automobile for free? After 10 days, I received a call from my aunt in Michigan. "Grandpa Frank's health has taken a severe decline. Parkinson's disease was worsening, and at a routine exam, physicians discovered several other concerns. They were concerned about heart issues. Apparently, I panicked and decided to go up to Michigan to visit him. It was roughly a 7-hour journey, and I planned to remain for a long weekend. I told my parents I was leaving, despite the fact that we had scarcely spoken since the dinner dispute. Mom simply nodded and told them to offer Grandpa his love. Dad grumbled something about me skipping work. Classic. I was irritated because they didn't care about Grandpa. My friend Mason, who has always enjoyed my grandfather's stories, was aware of the trip. He became sad for him and offered to drive with me. "I've been eager to see this great man," he explained. "I considered taking the Mustang, but Michigan roads in late spring are sheer horror, with potholes the size of kiddie pools from winter freeze-thaw cycles. I didn't want to risk damaging the recently rebuilt undercarriage. Furthermore, Mason's truck had greater heat, and Michigan was still cold in May, so we took that instead." When we arrived in Michigan, my whole demeanor altered. Grandpa was in bad shape. Seeing this powerful old Marine who used to carry me on his shoulders, now hardly able to handle a coffee cup, truly upset me. His body was failing him, but his intellect remained keen as ever. "Did you take your time coming here?" When we came in, he muttered and smirked, letting me know he was kidding. We sat down with him, and he began giving us war stories and historical tales, which Mason thoroughly enjoyed. It was nice to see Grandpa happy again, even if just for a moment. Mason had to return after the first weekend for work, but I opted to remain longer. Grandpa's condition was worse than I had anticipated, and I wanted to be present. I slept on a cot in his assisted living facility room, supported him in moving, and ensured he ate appropriately. We had several nice conversations throughout those nearly 3 weeks. He inquired about the Mustang, of course. I showed him photos of the completed restoration on my phone, and his eyes lighted up. "Damn, buddy, you did well. Really fantastic job." "I am proud of you, kiddo." Then he asked about my parents and Lucas. Saw right through my hazy responses. "Aren't they giving you crap about that car?" I nodded. I told him about Lucas wanting it for college and the major battle. Grandpa simply shook his head. "Your father never understood the importance of working with your hands. I've always wanted the easy way. He then looked me full in the eye. Don't give in. Do you hear me? That automobile is yours. You constructed it. You keep it. I promised him. After almost 3 weeks, Grandpa had stabilized enough that I felt comfortable returning home. The nurse had an excellent schedule with him, and my aunt visited him every day. I took the Greyhound bus back. It was a long, unpleasant journey, and I was fatigued. When I arrived at our town's bus terminal, I ordered an Uber to drive me home because no one in my family offered me a ride, despite the fact that I texted my estimated arrival time. When I pulled into our driveway, something seemed strange right away. The Mustang was not in the garage where I had parked it. I assumed my father had relocated it to work on his own project vehicle, so I looked everywhere, including the street, parking lot, and side yard. Nothing. I raced inside and discovered my mother in the kitchen. Where is my car? I demanded. She startled as if astonished to see me and quickly tried to change the conversation. Oh, you are back. How's your granddad doing? Where is my Mustang? I repeated, not allowing her to deflect. She refused to meet my gaze. She became quite interested in the dish she was drying. Lucas transported it to college. He needed an automobile for school. And since you were gone, my blood ran cold. He drove my car to campus after I said no to everyone. Are you serious? Dad walked in, and I could tell by the look on his face that he understood what was going on. Now listen, he began in his courtroom voice. We tried to call you, but reception was spotty up there. I fired back. I had a signal the entire time. I texted you every day with updates on Grandpa. You didn't call because you knew what I was going to say. Dad carried on. Look, what's done is finished. Lucas needs the car more than you do right now. So what am I doing? Just existing. That is my car. I'm heading to campus right now to get it. That might be difficult, Dad said. The title has been transferred legally. Lucas now owns the car. For a moment, I thought I misheard him. You did what? I swear my brain captured a screenshot. He said it in a way that suggested he was discussing the weather. It just makes more sense for him to have it right. Did you transfer my title? How in the hell did you do that without my signature? They exchanged a look that revealed everything I needed to know. So, about that. We forged your signature. Are you really kidding me? That is illegal. Don't be so dramatic, Mom snapped, finally giving up the sweet act. We're your parents. We were simply making the right decision. I pulled out my phone and began dialing. Who are you calling? Mom inquired, suddenly nervous. The police. Dad lunged forward, grabbing my phone. Do not be stupid, you're going to regret it. I looked at them. They were already boiling. Yes, someone will regret this, but it will not be me. I took my phone back and walked out. I called Mason, and he immediately came to pick me up. What happened, dude? You look like you saw a ghost. I told him everything. What the actual hell? Was all Mason could say at first. I crashed on his couch that night, too angry to even consider returning home. I kept picturing Lucas driving my car around campus, flaunting it like he owned it, and my parents believing they'd gotten away with it. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Mason's father, Richard, returned home late from work. Fortunately, he is a lawyer. Mason told him what had happened, and then he joined us. He told me that what they did was clearly illegal. Grand theft, auto forgery, and fraud are all felonies. But he warned me that I should think carefully about whether I want to go down this road with my family because they could face serious consequences. But guess what? I had no ass to give. Allow them to face whatever hell was coming because they deserved it. That night, my phone was flooded with texts from my parents, all variations of, "Come home so we can talk about this. You're overreacting, and family comes first." I ignored them all and slept, knowing I was about to teach them a lesson. That is when Operation Takedown began. The following day, the first stop was the DMV, the most boring place on the planet. But man, was it worth the 3-hour wait? I requested records of the Mustang's title transfer. Sure enough, there it was. My signature on the transfer papers was dated precisely when I was sitting in a hospital room in Michigan with Grandpa. I also obtained copies of the original title, which showed that the car was legally mine since Grandpa signed it over. Next, I went through all of my files at home while my parents were at work. I had always kept meticulous records for the Mustang restoration. I had every receipt, every before and after photo, and every piece of evidence that it was my project from the start. I had the original bill of sale from Grandpa to me. I even received texts from my parents acknowledging that it was my car project. Then Richard suggested we get proof that I was in Michigan when the title transfer occurred. This was the clever part. I went to my bank and obtained ATM camera footage that showed me taking cash from a Michigan ATM on the same day the transfer. Documents were signed. I was about 0.2 miles away from the DMV when my signature appeared on the paperwork. While everything was going on, my phone was constantly blowing up. My parents left frantic voicemails that began with wrath. "How dare you not answer our calls?" Complete indignation turned to shame. "We're so worried about you." Finally, they settled on manipulation. "If you love your brother, you'll come home and we can work this out as a family." I didn't answer to anything. I was finished chatting. This was much beyond anything a family reunion could resolve. With all of the proof in hand, Richard and I headed to the police station to report grand theft, auto forgery, and fraud. Walking out of that police station seemed like I had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just accepting whatever garbage my family wanted to dole out. I fought back. The wheels of justice moved slowly, but they did spin. It took them roughly a month to address my concern. My parents' attempts to reach me have escalated during the last 4 weeks. The messages were increasingly frantic. "Stop being dramatic and come back home immediately." And "You're tearing the family apart for a crappy car." And my particular favorite, "You're making a mountain out of a molehill." They took my automobile, faked my signature on legal documents, and intimidated me when I confronted them about it. But, yes, I was overreacting. I kept myself occupied during those weeks. I worked additional shifts at work, helped Mason's father around the home to thank them for letting me remain, and began looking for my own apartment, deciding it was finally time to break away from my family's BS. After almost a month of silence from the police, the detective phoned. "We're moving on your case," he said. "Officers are on their way to your brother's dorm to recover the vehicle." As I hung up, my pulse pounded. It was really occurring. I was partly certain the officers would just dismiss it as a family affair. But when the officers arrived at Lucas's hostel to reclaim the Mustang, it was not there. According to his roommate, Lucas took it to a friend's house for safekeeping after receiving concerned texts from our parents. Because obviously, he had. That's when things became extremely serious. What began as a family squabble quickly escalated into a criminal probe. The cops traced the automobile to a storage place approximately an hour away from school. The flat was rented under a false name, but they tracked the payment back to my father's credit card, where they discovered my Mustang under a tarp with the VIN plates already removed. The detectives claimed it was obvious proof that they intended to either sell it illegally or make it disappear forever. Removing VIN plates is a criminal in and of itself. The following day, Lucas was arrested in his room for receiving stolen stuff and conspiracy. My parents were arrested at work and accused with forgery, fraud, and tampering with evidence. The local newspaper published a piece titled, "Family Charged in Classic Car Theft Scheme." There was even a photo of my parents being led into court for their arraignment. My phone practically burst after that. Relatives I hardly knew called to inquire what the heck was going on. High school pals were messaging to see whether the reports were real. My parents, now desperate, were phoning hourly with sobbing appeals to dismiss the charges in their wildest dreams. "This will ruin Lucas's future," Mom wailed on one voicemail. "He could go to jail. Is this what you want for your brother?" Another from Dad. "You are a complete jerk. The legal expenses are depleting our finances. We could lose our house." I did not call back. Not once. They had made their decision when they thought stealing from me was acceptable. Now they were sucking it up. My extended family had divided. Some people were outraged by what my parents had done, including my aunt in Michigan. Naturally, others sided with my parents. My mom's sister left me a nasty message about how I was ruining the family over a silly automobile. I didn't respond. What was the point? Despite the uproar, I remained calm, as if nothing they said or did could touch me anymore. I'd spent my entire life as the nice child, the sensible one, the one who swallowed it up and coped with whatever injustice came my way. And where had that led me? Nowhere. The most startling call came from Lucas at the county prison. He seemed desperate, which was unlike his normal confident tone. He began by claiming that everything was a misunderstanding and that he assumed I was okay with his having the automobile since our parents had stated so. I stopped him off right then and ordered him not to lie. He knew precisely what he was doing since I warned him directly at dinner that he would never have my automobile. After a moment he confessed it. He stated he assumed I wouldn't file charges since families stick together or something like that. He wrote, "My father claimed it wasn't a big deal because they're my parents, and that the car was a waste on me anyway because I just worked on it instead of driving it somewhere worthwhile." Pure entitled BS, but precisely what I've faced with my entire life. Then he had the arrogance to beg me to dismiss the charges because they were going to ruin his life. I just chuckled, welcomed him to the world of consequences, and hung up. As the investigation progressed, I received regular updates from the detective. The evidence was overwhelming, he stated. The prosecution was certain they had a good case based on the falsified signature, ATM footage confirming I was out of state, and the removal of the VIN plates. "Your parents' attorney has reached out about a plea deal," the detective informed me. "They want to make this go away." I believe they did. But it wasn't going away. Not this time. Edit 1. I didn't anticipate this to draw so much attention. Thank you everyone. Edit 2. For those who have requested an update, I will provide one as soon as possible. Things are a little messy right now, so please pardon me till I am free. So here's a roundup. Hello Reddit. It's been a little over a year since my initial article went viral, and many of you have messaged me asking for an update. And let me tell you, there is a lot to say, so buckle up. So the judicial system is sluggish as hell, but it gets there eventually. Over the following few months, I observed from a distance as my family's pristine image crumbled. It turned out that the prosecution was not interested in any plea negotiations. Lucas received a felony conviction for grand theft auto and tampering with evidence, was sentenced to 10 months in county prison, 4 years probation, and 600 hours of community service. When the conviction was announced, State University dismissed him immediately. No appeals and no second chances. My parents did not fare much better. Dad was charged with forgery, fraud, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence. Mom faced the same accusations because it was shown that she was the one who faked my signature. They were both sentenced to 24 months probation, huge penalties, and 45 days in county prison, which the court refused to let them serve on weekends despite their requests. Dad lost his accounting job. It turns out that corporations dislike having convicted fraudsters around to handle money. Their immaculate reputation was entirely shattered. In addition to the criminal accusations, the civil suit I brought with Richard's assistance impacted them hard. They had to sell their home to pay court expenses and damages. Last I heard, they were living in a squalid apartment and barely making ends meet. They attempted to declare bankruptcy to avoid the civil judgment, but the court refused them. They made one final attempt to contact us via their court-appointed counsel. I offered to take out a second mortgage on the property they were already selling to pay for the car and more if I just dismissed the charges. Said we were still a family and could overcome this. I returned one line through Richard. "We stopped being a family when you picked Lucas over me for the final time." The Mustang was finally removed from the storage container. The court ordered that it be returned to me, plus damages for attempted theft and mental anguish. It returned with a damage in the fender and other scuffs, but nothing I couldn't repair. While all of this legal crap was going on, I had been staying with Mason and his family, but I realized I needed a more permanent answer. I wasn't just looking to move out, I wanted to get out of that harmful atmosphere totally. So I made my selection. I packed up all I had, which was not much. It's amazing how little you need when you start new. I resigned my job and came to Michigan to live with Grandpa Frank. His Parkinson's was not improving, and he required more continuous care than my aunt could provide with her work and children. It was truly the finest decision I'd ever made. I transferred my community college credits to a nearby school and began working part-time at a local vehicle restoration company, where they valued my abilities. The first weekend after I moved here, I took the Mustang up to see Grandpa. He seemed really exhausted. The sight of him crushed my heart. I assisted him to the parking lot so he could see the car well in the sunshine. He brushed his shaking palm across the fender. The smile on his face was adorable. He was ecstatic that I moved in with him. Living with Grandpa for a few months was the finest thing that could have happened to both of us. I'd help him with everything, even cooking his meals, while he sat at the kitchen table giving me advice on compression ratios and valve timing. We'd watch classic westerns together in the evening, him falling asleep halfway through but insisting I tell him how they ended anyhow. After Grandpa's health deteriorated, my parents attempted several visits. He declined to see them. He claimed he didn't want to see those two hypocrites. Grandpa passed away roughly 7 months after I moved into his home. He passed away quietly in his sleep. I was with him last night, telling him about the 1970 Charger that the shop had just taken in for restoration. I wept for him. Still do. My family attended the funeral. Lucas looked like horrible following his time in county jail. My parents seemed worn down and aged. I maintained my distance even when they attempted to converse. I didn't trust myself to say something that wouldn't cause a scene. And Grandpa deserved more than that. On his last day after the funeral, I was astonished to see that Grandpa had left me everything: his home, tools, and small funds. My father appeared to have been smacked when the lawyer read the will. I guess he was banking on an inheritance to aid with their financial issues as a result of the legal turmoil. The lawyer then handed me an envelope containing a letter from Grandpa. The letter began with, "To my real son." He stated that the last several months with me were the happiest he'd been in years. He even asked that I maintain the Mustang running smoothly. I couldn't help it. I sobbed when I read it. I still kept the note in the Mustang's glove compartment. Still in Michigan, living at Grandpa's home. I've made some good friends, have a job I enjoy, and my future seems promising. Every Sunday when the weather is nice, I take the Mustang for a long drive along the coastal roads near the lake we drive on. My relatives called me several times, pleading for assistance. I always blocked them and told them to go to hell. The door is closed and secured. My family banned me from Christmas. Because I was awkward, I funded them for 12 years and $95,000, so I cut everything off. Now they're collapsing. My name is Graham Holden, and I've served as the family's ATM for the past 35 years. Not the favorite son, not the success story to brag about at dinner parties, just the dependable one who pays the bills when everyone else fails. Miles Carter, my younger brother, has always been the golden child, the one with charm and big dreams. While I have been working double shifts to ensure that his dreams do not become nightmares. It all began when we were children. Miles was the athlete, the popular kid who could get himself out of trouble with a smile and a joke. I was the quiet one who got good grades, worked part-time jobs in high school, and always seemed to cover for Miles's mistakes. When he was 18, he crashed his father's car, and I gave him my summer job savings to cover the deductible. When he needed money for college applications, I worked additional shifts at the grocery store. It became a pattern that continued into adulthood. Miles married his high school sweetheart, Lauren Whitaker, after college, and they have 3 children, Chloe Carter and Ryan Carter. Beautiful kids, as smart as whips, and I adored them as if they were my own. Miles bounced from job to job, looking for the next big opportunity, the next get-rich-quick scheme. Lauren worked part-time as a dental hygienist, but with 3 children and Miles's fluctuating income, they struggled constantly. That is where I came in. Uncle Graham was the guy who never missed a birthday, never forgot Christmas presents, and always had money when the lights were about to go out. I worked as an IT manager for a mid-sized company, made decent money, lived modestly in a studio apartment, and spent the majority of my extra money on keeping Miles's family afloat. The number of things I had paid for over the years was staggering. Chloe's dance classes, Ryan's soccer league fees, emergency car repairs after Miles's transmission failed, groceries when the cupboards were empty, and the deposit on their new apartment after they were evicted from their previous one. I once calculated that over 12 years, I had given them nearly $95,000. Not loans, mind you, but gifts. Because family helps family, correct? My parents, Elaine and Richard Holden, lived comfortably on Dad's pension and Mom's part-time job at the local library. They weren't wealthy, but they weren't poor either. They'd occasionally helped Miles with small amounts, but the big emergencies were always my responsibility. Graham is so responsible, Mom would say. He doesn't mind helping out his brother. Except that I was starting to mind a lot. 4 months before Christmas, the breaking point began to build. Miles called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice tense from stress. "Graham, man, I need a favor." I was sitting in my apartment, eating leftover takeout and watching Netflix after working 11 hours debugging server issues. "What's up?" "Lauren's hours at work were reduced, and Ryan requires this specialized equipment for his football team. It's expensive, but without it, he can't play. And you understand how important this is to him." Ryan was 12 and decent at football, but he wasn't aiming for the NFL. I still cared about the kid. "How long are we talking?" $650 for the gear, plus team fees, for a total of around $1,000. I exhaled. Miles, I just covered your rent last month. I know, and I am grateful. This is different. This is for Ryan. You wouldn't want him to miss out because his father is going through a tough time, right? The guilt trip. Classic Miles. I transferred the funds the next day. 10 days later, I was scrolling through Facebook on my lunch break when I came across photos from Lauren's girls' night out. Expensive-looking restaurant. Cocktails. Her and 3 friends posing with plates of food that likely cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. The photos were posted on the same day I sent the money for Ryan's football gear. When Miles called the following month, asking for assistance with their car insurance payment, I inquired about the girls' night. Oh, that. Yeah. Lauren needed to let off some steam. Graham, work has been stressing her out with the money I sent for Ryan's football. Come on. We are juggling a lot here. We sometimes need to borrow from one thing to pay for another. It all balances out. It all balances out. That became Miles' catchphrase whenever I inquired about how my money was being spent. I saw photos of his new fishing rod and tackle box on Instagram after I had paid their electric bill. When Lauren posted pictures of her new highlights and manicure after I'd paid for Chloe's school supplies, everything was balanced out. Miles barely pretended any longer. He'd call, explain the situation, specify the amount required, and expect the funds to be in his account within 48 hours. And, like an idiot, I continued to send it. What made matters worse was how I was treated during family gatherings. Miles was always the center of attention, telling everyone about his latest business venture or the children's accomplishments. I'd sit on the sidelines, nodding politely as he took credit for providing opportunities that I had paid for. Ryan's doing so well in football, he'd tell family. We invested in getting him the right equipment, and it's really paying off. Chloe's dance recital was stunning. We're very proud of her. The lessons are expensive, but it's worthwhile to see her succeed. We invested. We are proud. No mention of Uncle Graham, who made it all possible. Miles announced his latest entrepreneurial venture over Thanksgiving dinner, 6 weeks before the Christmas incident. I'm starting a landscaping business, he explained, gesturing with his fork. I'm going to be my own boss and set my own hours. I have it all figured out. That sounds wonderful, honey, Mom said, beaming. You've always been so creative. I had heard this speech dozens of times. The food truck business lasted 3 weeks. The online retail store that never made a sale. He earned a personal training certification, but never used it. Each one would be the key to his ultimate wealth and independence. The startup costs are fairly high though, Miles added, glancing in my direction. We need to get a truck, equipment, and insurance. It'll probably cost between $18,000 and $22,000 to get it off the ground properly. The table became quiet. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for me to offer to fund Miles's latest dream. Instead, I cut into my turkey and said, "Sounds like you'll need to save up or get a business loan." Miles's expression fell. Yeah, well, banks are pretty strict about lending to new businesses. For good reason, I replied. Most small businesses fail within the first year. The tension on the table was thick enough to cut with a knife. Lauren gave me a look that could have frozen water. Mom cleared her throat and turned the conversation to Chloe's upcoming dance recital. Miles cornered me in the kitchen after dinner as I was doing the dishes. What was that about? He inquired, his tone low and angry. What was it about? So, what about the business loan comment? You've always been helpful. I put down the plate I was drying and turned to face him. Miles, I have given you thousands of dollars over the years. Maybe it's time you learned how to stand on your own. Stand on my own? His voice rose. Simple for you to say. You don't have children. You do not have any responsibilities. I don't have kids because I've been supporting yours. The words remained in the air between us. Miles's face flushed red. Nobody asked you to do that. You literally ask me every month. That is different. That's an emergency. This is my future we're discussing. I dried my hands on the dish towel and went to the door. Your future isn't my responsibility, Miles. That conversation was the beginning of the end, though I didn't realize it at the time. Miles stopped calling as frequently, and when he did, his voice was colder than it had previously been. Lauren unfriended me on Facebook. The kids still hugged me when they saw me, but there was an awkwardness that hadn't been there before. 4 weeks before Christmas, I received a call from Mom. Graham, honey, we need to talk about Christmas dinner. I was at my desk at work, attempting to resolve a network issue that had plagued us for days. How about it? Well, Miles and Lauren believe it would be best if we kept it small this year. Only immediate family. I blinked, not understanding. I am immediate family. Mom sighed. You understand what I mean. Miles, Lauren, and the children. They're feeling a little stressed about money right now, and having someone there who they owe money to could make things awkward. The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. Are you withdrawing my invitation to Christmas? It's not that we don't want you there, Mom replied quickly. It's just that Miles feels it would be awkward. And you know how he reacts when he is stressed. How does he react when he's stressed? Mom, I've been keeping his family fed and housed for 12 years. We appreciate it, sweetheart, but perhaps this year you could do your own thing. Visit friends and take a vacation. I sat in my office chair, staring at the computer screen, trying to figure out what I was hearing. My own mother was excluding me from Christmas because my financial support made my brother uncomfortable. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. Miles owes me thousands of dollars, hasn't paid back a cent, and now I'm banned from Christmas because my presence might remind him of that fact. Graham, please don't make this harder than it has to be. I hung up without saying goodbye. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. Miles, look, man. I heard Mom talking to you. Yes, she did. It's not personal. It's just that Lauren has been very stressed about the money situation, and having you there would make things awkward for everyone. Is it weird for everyone, or just you? Please don't be like that. You know how family things go. It's supposed to be relaxed and enjoyable. We can't relax if we're afraid you'll judge us or keep track of what we owe you. I laughed bitterly. I have never asked you to pay me back, Miles. Not once. I understand. But it's implied, isn't it? Every time you look at us, we can see you calculating how much we cost you. Maybe because you do cost me a lot. See, that is exactly what I'm talking about. This attitude. Christmas is supposed to be about family and not money, right? And it appears that losers like me have no place at the family table. The line became silent. I could hear Miles breathing. I could imagine him trying to figure out how to respond. I never said you were a loser. You didn't have to. I hung up and sat in my office, looking out the window at the December sky. The company holiday party decorations twinkled around me, but I felt empty. For 12 years, I'd put Miles' family before my own life, future, and happiness. In return, I was labeled as a burden, someone whose presence would ruin their Christmas. That evening, I made a life-changing decision. I opened my laptop and began reviewing my financial records, including automatic payments, bank transfers, and Venmo transactions. Over the last year, I've sent Miles and Lauren $14,750 for their rent, car payment, children's activities, and emergency expenses that seem to pop up every month like clockwork. I canceled all automatic payments, the ones for Chloe's dance classes, Ryan's sports fees, and the monthly contribution to their grocery budget that Miles persuaded me to set up because it makes budgeting easier when we know we can rely on it. Gone. All of it. Then I called my bank and blocked any future transfers to Miles's account that did not have my explicit approval for each transaction. By the end, I had severed all financial ties with Miles's family. It felt strange, like cutting the strings that had held me captive for a decade. However, it also felt liberating. I did not tell anyone what I had done. I simply went to work the next day, returned home to my quiet apartment, and, for the first time in years, did not check my phone obsessively to see if Miles needed money for some new crisis. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone, which should have been depressing, but instead felt peaceful. I cooked myself a nice dinner, watched movies, and didn't think about Miles's family without me. I did not send presents. I did not call. I just let Christmas happen without me. The first crack in Miles's perfect little family Christmas appeared on December 27th. Lauren called me. Graham, it's Lauren. I was surprised to hear from her. We hadn't spoken directly for months. Hi, Lauren. Listen, I understand things have been strange lately, but we have a problem. Chloe's dance studio has threatened to drop her from classes if we do not pay the balance by January 5th. I know you usually handle that, but the payment didn't go through this month. I canceled the automatic payments. There was silence on the other end of the line. You what? I canceled all automatic payments. I won't be covering Chloe's dance classes anymore. But Graham, she's been with this program for 4 years. She's finally getting good parts in the recital. You can't just. I can. So I did. Miles made it clear that there is no room for losers like me in your family. So I'm no longer a member of your family, so your family expenses aren't my concern. Graham, that's not. Miles didn't mean it like that. Oh, Lauren, how did he mean that? She stumbles over her words, attempting to explain away what cannot be explained away. He was simply stressed. You know how he gets. I understand exactly how he feels and what he means. Chloe's dance classes are now your responsibility. We can't afford them without your help. Then I guess Chloe will have to find a more affordable hobby. I hung up, feeling bad for Chloe but determined to stick to my decision. 7 minutes later, Miles called. What the hell, Graham? Lauren is crying because you are discontinuing Chloe's dance classes. I am cutting off everything, Miles, all of it. You preferred a Christmas without the loser brother. Congratulations, you also get a life without the loser brother. Come on, man. You are being petty. So we didn't invite you to a single Christmas dinner. A big deal. Get over it. It's not just one dinner, Miles. It's been about 12 years of being treated as an ATM rather than a brother. We don't treat you like an ATM. I laughed. When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked how I was doing? When was the last time we hung out and you didn't need money? Silence. That's what I thought. Listen, Graham. I am sorry about the Christmas situation. We can celebrate New Year's instead. Big family dinner, as always, with me paying for the groceries. So if you want to contribute, Miles, no, I am done contributing to anything. Rent, car payments, children's activities, and your wife's girls' nights. Done. You can't be serious. Dead serious. Figure it out for yourself. The following few weeks were blissfully quiet. There were no emergency calls regarding past due bills. There are no last-minute requests for grocery money. There will be no guilt trips about letting down the children. For the first time in more than a decade, my bank account increased rather than decreased each month. I used the money I would have given Miles to finally go on the vacation I had been putting off for years. I booked 10 days in Costa Rica, something I had always wanted to do but never did because there was always a family emergency that required my funds instead. While I was lying on a beach in Tamarindo, sipping a cold beer and admiring the sunset, my phone rang with increasingly desperate messages from Miles. Graham, call me. We need to talk. Dude, the mortgage company is threatening to foreclose. I need help. Graham, please. The kids are asking why you haven't called. I read each message, felt a familiar sense of guilt, and then deleted it without responding. This was Miles's test. Could he handle his own life without his big brother's financial support? The answer appears to have been no. I returned from Costa Rica to find 31 missed calls from various family members. Mom, Dad, Miles, Lauren and Lauren's mother had all called to tell me I needed to step up and help my brother. The first call I returned was to Mom. Thank you, Graham. Miles has been trying to contact you for weeks. I understand. I was on vacation. Vacation? While your brother's family is falling apart? My brother's family fell apart the day they decided I wasn't good enough to join them for Christmas. That is ancient history now, sweetheart. Miles needs your help. They are behind on everything. The mortgage, car payments, and children's school fees. They might lose their house. Then maybe Miles should get a job that pays enough to support his family. He has a job, part-time at a sporting goods store. Mom, that is not a career. That's what teenagers do after school. You can't just abandon them. I am not abandoning them. I'm setting boundaries. There is a difference. Mom sighed heavily. I don't understand what's gotten into you. What's instilled in me is self-esteem. I should have developed this years ago. The conversation with Dad went similarly, except that he used the disappointed father approach. Graham, I raised you better than this. Family cares for family. I've been caring for this family for 12 years, Dad. Where were you when Miles needed help? We helped when we could. You helped with $75 here and there. I was sending thousands because you make more money. I earn more money because I worked for it. I received an education, found a good job, and lived below my means. Miles chose to coast on my generosity instead of building a career. He's trying. He is 32 years old, Dad. How long will he try before he succeeds at something? Dad did not have an answer for that. The most heartbreaking call came from Chloe. She was now 13, old enough to recognize that something had changed, but not old enough to comprehend why. "Uncle Graham, it's Chloe." Her voice was small and uncertain. It broke my heart. "Hello, sweetheart. How are you?" "I'm fine, I suppose. My mother says I can't do dance anymore because it's too expensive. And Daddy's been really sad lately." I closed my eyes and felt the weight of her disappointment. "I'm sorry to hear that, Chloe. Are you mad at us?" The innocent question struck me like a truck. "I am not mad at you, Chloe. Not at all." "Then why aren't you coming over anymore? Ryan misses you too. We used to play video games all the time." "Sweetheart, it's complicated. It's a grown-up issue between me and your father. Can't you just apologize to each other and make up? If only it were so simple." "Maybe someday, Chloe." After I hung up with Chloe, I sat in my apartment, wondering if I was doing the right thing. These children did not choose to be born into a family in which their father was unable to provide for them. They did not deserve to suffer as a result of the conflict between Miles and me. But I also realized that if I caved now, nothing would change. Miles would realize that he could treat me however he pleased, and I would still be there to help him out. This pattern would continue indefinitely. I had to remain strong. Miles's desperation intensified in March. He'd lost his part-time job at the sporting goods store for being late too often. Lauren worked extra shifts at the dental office, but it was insufficient to cover their expenses without my monthly contributions. Miles began showing up at my apartment building, waiting for me in the parking lot when I returned home from work. "Graham, we need to talk." I saw him before he saw me and considered turning around and driving away, but this would only delay the inevitable conversation. "What do you want, Miles?" "I want my brother back." He looked awful. He had lost weight. His clothing was wrinkled. There were dark circles under his eyes. For a moment I felt sorry for him. "I'm right here." "No, you are not. You are angry and bitter, and you're taking it out on Lauren and the children." "I am not taking it out on anyone. I'm simply not paying your bills anymore." "Graham, we're about to lose everything. The house, the cars, and everything. Is this what you want?" "What I want is for you to take responsibility for your own life." "I'm taking responsibility. I am looking for a better job. I'm trying to get my landscaping business started." "With what money? Even with my financial support, you couldn't afford to start the business. How are you going to handle it now?" Miles ran his hands through his hair, a frustrated gesture I remembered him making as a child. "I need help, Graham. This is only temporary. Just until I'm back on my feet." How many times have I heard that over the last 12 years? This time is different. This time is different because I'm not falling for it anymore. Miles' expression hardened. "Do you know what your problem is? You're bitter because I have a family while you don't. You are alone and you are jealous. So you're attempting to destroy what I've created." His words stung because they contained a grain of truth. I was alone. I didn't have a wife or children, but I made the necessary sacrifices to support his family. "Do you know why I don't have a family, Miles? Because every time I saved money to buy a house, take a nice vacation with a woman, or improve my own life, you had an emergency that required my savings. I put my life on hold for 12 years to support yours. Nobody asked you to do that. You asked me to do that every month, every crisis, every time you called crying about being broke. I never cried. You're crying now." Miles wiped his eyes furiously. "This is not crying. This is frustrating. This is a consequence. Miles, for the first time in your life, you're experiencing actual consequences for your choices." "What are my choices?" "What about your decision to abandon your nieces and nephew?" Guilt trip. I had been waiting for it. I did not abandon Chloe or Ryan. I stopped enabling their father. They don't understand the difference. Then explain it to them. Tell them that Uncle Graham isn't their personal ATM anymore. Miles stood there for a moment, breathing heavily. Then he said what I expected. "If you don't help us, we'll lose our house. Chloe and Ryan will need to change schools. Lauren may have to quit her job if we relocate too far away. You are going to ruin the lives of 2 innocent children because you are angry with me. I'm going to let you be responsible for your own family." Same thing. No, Miles, it's not. He left after that. But I knew he would come back. Miles would spend every month of the foreclosure process trying to guilt, manipulate, or persuade me to save him once more. April brought the divorce documents. Lauren filed for divorce and moved back in with her parents, bringing Chloe and Ryan with her. The official reason was irreconcilable differences, but everyone in the family knew the true reason. Miles was unable to provide for his family, and without my financial support, the entire house of cards had collapsed. Miles called me crying, this time for real. Are you happy now? My wife left me. She took my children. I'm going to lose my house. Everything is falling apart. I felt truly sorry for him, but I also knew that this collapse had been unavoidable. I had just been postponing it with regular cash infusions. I'm not happy about any of this, Miles. Then help me fix it. I cannot repair your marriage. I can't change your relationship with your children. I can't change the fact that you're 32 years old and have no real job skills or career opportunities. You could help me keep my house. If I can show Lauren that I have the mortgage covered, she might come back with the money I give you. Only temporarily. No, Miles. Lauren left because you cannot support your family. What happens if you get her back using my money and I stop giving you money? She leaves again? I'll figure something out by then. You've been saying that for 12 years. After losing his house, Miles moved into a studio apartment across town. He got a job at a call center with regular hours and a steady, albeit modest, pay. It wasn't glamorous, but it was legitimate work. Lauren and the children remained with their parents. The divorce proceedings were messy and costly, with both parties hiring attorneys they couldn't afford. Throughout this, I maintained my boundaries. There will be no emergency loans, temporary assistance, or any other form of bailout. It was difficult, especially as I thought about Chloe and Ryan dealing with their parents' divorce. But I knew caving now would simply restart the cycle. The turning point occurred in July. I was eating dinner at a downtown restaurant when I noticed Miles at a corner table. He was with a woman I didn't recognize, who was attractive and well-dressed and laughing at something he had said. I got angry for a brief moment. He was taking a woman out for an expensive dinner while claiming to be broke. But then I noticed something. Miles appeared different, healthier. He had regained the weight he'd lost. His clothing was clean and pressed. And there was something in his posture that I hadn't noticed in years. Confidence. Our gazes met across the restaurant. He said something to the woman before walking over to my table. Graham. Miles, could I please sit down for a minute? I motioned to the empty chair across from me. He sat down with his hands folded on the table. I owe you an apology. I waited. Actually, I owe you a lot of apologies and probably some money, but we both know I can't pay that back right now. What has changed? Everything. Losing the house, Lauren and the kids, and being forced to move into that crappy apartment and work at the call center. It was horrible. However, it was also the best thing that ever happened to me. How so? Because for the first time in my adult life, I had to figure things out on my own. There was no safety net or big brother to call when things got tough. It was just me and my problems. Miles returned his gaze to the woman at the corner table who had been patiently waiting for him to return. That is Natalie. She is an accountant. We met at work. She is unaware of everything that has happened with you, including the money. She thinks I'm just a normal guy who works at a call center and lives in a studio apartment. Isn't that who you are? Miles smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen him give in years. Yes, it is. And you know what? It isn't that bad. The work is steady. The pay is decent, and I'm not always worried about money because I live within my means. How about Lauren and the kids? The divorce will be finalized next month. Lauren and I are doing better as co-parents than we were as spouses. The children are adjusting. Chloe's in a community center dance program that costs $25 a month instead of $240. Ryan plays in a free community soccer league. They're happy. Miles reached into his pocket and took out his wallet. He counted 5 $20 bills and placed them on the table. This is all I can afford right now, but I'd like to start paying you back. $100 per month until I have paid everything I owe you. I looked at the money on the table. At $100 per month, Miles would take about 70 years to repay what he owed me. Keep it, I replied, pushing the bills back toward him. Take Natalie out for a nice dinner. Miles's eyes filled with tears. Graham, You do not owe me money, Miles. You owe me an apology and respect. And perhaps we could try being actual brothers instead of the dysfunctional relationship we had previously. I'd like that. We shook hands across the table, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had reconnected with my brother. Over the course of several months, the family gradually began to heal. Mom and Dad, who had initially blamed me for Miles's downfall, eventually realized that I had done him a favor by forcing him to stand on his own feet. Miles' transformation from entitled mooch to responsible adult was impossible to overlook. Christmas that year was unique. We ate dinner at Mom and Dad's house. We're all together. This time, Miles brought a bottle of wine and a homemade dessert. He did not ask for money. He made no mention of his financial problems. He simply enjoyed being with his family. Chloe and Ryan were also there, commuting between their parents' homes under the new normal of joint custody. They looked happier than I had seen them in years. Probably because their parents didn't constantly fight over money. Chloe said, "Uncle Graham," as we opened presents, "thank you for the dance shoes." I had purchased a pair of ballet slippers for her community center classes. They weren't expensive, but she acted as if they were gold. "You're welcome, sweetheart. Daddy says you've helped him become a better person. Is this true?" I looked at Miles, who was assisting Ryan in assembling a new Lego set. "Your daddy helped himself become a better person. I just stopped making it so easy for him to avoid growing up. I don't understand." "You will when you're older." As I drove home that night, I reflected on the previous year. It was probably the most difficult year of my adult life. There were times when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. There were times when I was on the verge of sending money to help with a crisis. But seeing Miles now, truly happy and self-sufficient for the first time in his adult life, I knew I had made the right decision. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to enable their flaws. Miles had sent me a text message. "Thank you for dinner tonight, and for everything else. Love you, bro." I smiled and replied, "I love you too. See you next week at Ryan's soccer game." It was a minor thing, making plans to see each other that did not involve money or emergencies. However, after 12 years of being treated as an ATM, it felt revolutionary. I had finally gotten my brother back. More importantly, I had reclaimed my own identity. Setting boundaries was not only beneficial because it forced Miles to mature, it was that it allowed me to begin living my own life. With an extra $1,200 per month in my account instead of going to Miles' family, I was able to put down a down payment on a house, start dating seriously for the first time in years, and even start planning for my own future rather than constantly dealing with someone else's crisis. Sometimes being a good brother entails saying no. It took me 35 years to realize that lesson. My brother married the woman I planned to propose to. Our parents knew. The wedding was at our lake house, so I took $486,000 and walked away. I was scrolling through Facebook on a slow Thursday morning when the first photo appeared. A lakeside vista, rows of white seats, string lights strung between birch trees, and more. A dance floor, a tiered cake, people laughing over wine, and, right in the middle of one photo, my brother Ryan in a tuxedo, smiling with a woman in a white dress. I paused and refreshed the screen. More photographs kept loading. Ryan and Claire had a beautiful day. Someone had captioned it. I blinked. My thumb hung over the screen, frozen. I wasn't invited, but everyone else in the family was. Aunt Karen is carrying an awful silver clutch. My maternal cousins, including one who resides in Oregon. Uncle Tom's ugly fishing hat is still noticeable even in formal attire. They were all packed into shot after shot, like a great happy reunion that I had no idea had transpired until now. My name is Evan. I'm 34 years old and my own family appears to be unaware of my existence. I proceeded down the rabbit hole. Nearly 180 guests had been tagged. My parents appeared radiant. Mom is wearing a forest green outfit. She constantly claimed she was saving for something significant. Dad wore that too tight smile he saves for formal occasions and to conceal worry. Claire's family looked happy as they posed near a lakeside arch. Then came the bridal party shot. 5 guys and 6 bridesmaids. No me. There was no call. No save the date and not even a vague group text with a time and location that I could have easily ignored. It was not a mistake. They had not forgotten. I had been completely excluded, purposefully and ruthlessly. I sat there, heart pumping in my ears while the comments came in. Best day ever. I cannot believe how gorgeous that was. I am delighted to rejoice with you all. I locked my phone. I unlocked it again after 45 seconds. Still there. Still real. I went back to check my texts. Ryan says nothing. not for weeks. He sent his last communication in April. A meme about a classic game we used to play as children. It did not even receive a reply. Then one from Dad in June. Just a bland happy birthday, mate. There is no mention of any upcoming weddings. No invitation, no hint. I had not yet met Claire. I had no idea what she looked like until that moment. Mid-scroll, stomach drop. I didn't know her name. I did not call. I did not text. I did not write a comment. I did not hit like. 5 days later, I received a note from Dad. Your brother is heartbroken. You did not reach out. I stared at it for a time. We are sorry you were not invited. Let's not just explain that. As if I had disappointed them by not pretending. I didn't realize the entire family was celebrating anything without me. It's as if I owed them something. I did not respond. I could not. Not yet. I just sat there, feeling the weight of it, wondering when precisely I had been cut out and why no one had the courage to tell me. It is not as if Ryan and I were strangers. We grew up like many brothers. We had arguments on occasion, played video games together and switched tasks when we believed we could get away with it. We drifted a little after college. Sure. He went into corporate finance. I started freelancing as a web developer and doing contract work. We didn't see each other every week, but we shared birthday greetings, attended family gatherings and had drinks when we were in the same city. We sat together at the funeral for our cousin Daniel, who died earlier last year. He even crashed on my couch once when his work trip was prolonged. It wasn't ideal, but it wasn't terrible. Nothing to imply this, but I'm guessing it didn't start with the wedding. It simply became evident. Looking back, there were fissures. Like when I came home for Thanksgiving 3 years ago and Ryan told me he was thinking about proposing. He had been imprecise, saying he was still figuring out the timing. Mom had effectively silenced him in mid-sentence. I assumed it was because it was too early to disclose, rather than because they intended to make it a family affair with one exception, or because I offered to host Christmas at my home last summer. Everyone mentioned they were keeping things small, and travel was difficult this year. But then I noticed the photographs on Mom's Instagram. Ryan's place was lit up like a Hallmark movie. They sat around a fireplace in matching jammies. Each of those times stung it aside. Life gets busier. People create plans. Miscommunications occur. That's what I've told myself till now. Little, but I shook. Until 180 people assembled at a lakeside site, and nobody believed I merited a seat. I began to reflect deeper, recalling small incidents that didn't seem significant at the time, such as how Dad always seemed to play peacekeeper but never genuinely took my side. Or how Mom would compliment Ryan's job promotions as if he were receiving gold stars, but never inquired about my work unless it was to urge I try something more stable. And birthdays. Oh, birthdays. Ryan got surprise parties and handmade cakes. I received texts and occasionally a regifted bottle of wine. At the time I just laughed it off. He's the golden child. I joke with my friends. I'm just an extra. But when the extra doesn't show up, they're devastated. I wish I could say that I was astonished. But I was not. Not really. Not in my gut. I guess a part of me already knew. The wedding simply ripped the curtain down. And now I needed to decide what to do with it. Whether I should pretend it never happened, respond to Dad's message in a kind and forgiving manner, or stop pretending. I didn't respond. Not that day. Not the day after either. But I started paying attention, replaying events, observing how people spoke to me, recalling who showed up when I moved residences last year, who returned my calls, and who asked how I was doing without attempting to change me. Because if my absence from the wedding had caused them so much grief, why hadn't my absence from their planning done the same? That question kept buzzing in my mind. Every time I opened my phone, saw another photo, or scrolled past the cheerful faces of folks I used to consider family, I noticed something else. There was one photo, which I had never seen before, posted by a mutual friend, not a family. It was a group shot taken behind the groom and bride just off center, standing casually with a drink in hand. My ex smiled as if she belonged there. I tapped and expanded the photo. There she was, Olivia. I dated this girl for approximately 2.5 years. She broke up with me 16 months ago because she needed space and was not ready for something serious. There she was, wearing a pale blue bridesmaid's dress, clutching her waist, laughing with someone I didn't recognize, and my brother stood by her, hand on her lower back, smiling. The timeline snapped together. I believe that's when everything changed. Not the wedding, not the words, not the images, but that single image, tucked away as an afterthought. Everything stopped being perplexing and began to make cruel, perfect sense. I did not blow up. I did not anger. I just stared. The silence that followed was not hollow. It was the start of something. It's strange how stillness can feel more intense than screaming. When I saw that photo, I didn't slam the phone or hurl it across the room like you would in a dramatic breakup scenario. I just sat there quite still. There was no music or TV on in the background. Just the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the ancient ceiling fan above me. My intellect was not racing, it was organizing, not worrying, and sorting. Olivia, my brother, had a wedding to which I was not invited. A heartbroken text arrived 5 days later. The longer I gazed at the photograph, the clearer it got. Ryan's hand rested so securely on the small of her back. The proximity, her smile. Not the polite sort you throw around at gatherings, but the genuine one I used to earn after inside jokes and late-night trips in the stupid way I'd sing in the car. That was my smile. I remember it since I used to pursue it. Now it was in his wedding photos. And no one told me. Not her, not him, nor my parents. You have to understand that Olivia was not just random ex. She was in my life for over 2.5 years. I brought the first girl home to meet my folks. The first person I had ever truly considered a future with. She and I had a rough relationship in the end. Sure, but we hadn't ended on animosity, only distance. She claimed to be exhausted and in need of time to reflect. The breakup was quiet, sorrowful, and filled with loose ends. She cried. I cried. We pledged to stay on good terms, maybe even reunite someday when things made more sense. Apparently she understood things far faster than I did. I scrolled on, fingers numb and eyes unfocused. Another photograph, this time from the rehearsal dinner. Olivia sat next to Ryan, her hand on the table, and they both laughed with my mother. My mother's smile was beaming as if she had just won the lottery. I had no idea they knew each other so well. Ryan had met her at family gatherings before, but never in an intimate setting. He'd never asked about her and didn't seem really interested. I used to tell him about our friendship, just like you would with a brother. I confided in him when we were squabbling, when I was arranging our anniversary trip, and when I considered proposing. He constantly had a calm demeanor, as if he didn't care. They said relationships were complicated and I shouldn't rush things. Looking back, those discussions feel like landmines that I stepped on unknowingly. There were no photographs from their first date. There is no time frame to show when everything switched. Just this, the surprise. Completely formed. As if I had missed the entire film and only got the last 10 minutes. I did not sleep that night. I lay on the couch. The light from my phone screen dimmed yet remained on, fueling the storm in my belly. I dismissed every interaction between them that I could recall. Every time I thought she stayed in conversation with Ryan for too long, it played out in a terrible loop. I felt like an idiot, and much worse than that. I felt cheated. The next morning I called my best friend Chris. On the fourth ring he replied with the same half-asleep voice he uses when I wake him too early. Are you up? I asked. Now I am. What up? Did you see the wedding photographs? Yes, man. I was about to say something then realized. Wait, you weren't there? I paused. No, Chris, I wasn't invited. There was stillness. Wait, what? Are you serious? I've explained everything. The Facebook scroll, the text from my father, the photo, Olivia. His reaction ranged between stunned and enraged. He questioned, did they knock their heads or something? How can you not invite your own brother to your wedding, especially since you are marrying his ex? I didn't have an answer, but as I thought about it, I realized how deep this went. This was not a mistake, it was not an awkward oversight. It was planned, coordinated, and safeguarded. I spent the following few days replaying it in my memory. I remembered having a talk with my mother last Christmas about Ryan's maturity this year and how love can arise in the most unexpected places. I assumed she was talking about his settling down in general, but it's more likely she was referring to Olivia. They were already together back then. I began to spiral. Not in a dramatic, I'm losing my mind sense. More of a cold surgical unwinding. I contacted our cousin Lauren, the only family member who had ever been slightly impartial in our never-ending familial favoritism circus. She responded while jogging, her breath coming in bursts. Hello Evan, is everything okay? Mayor, did you attend the wedding? Her quiet said everything. I only need to know one thing, I said in a tense voice. How long had they been together? She paused. Look, I didn't know the entire story. I thought maybe you did. I mean, it has been a while, correct? Since you and Olivia. I didn't respond. They started showing up for family events together about 7 months ago. Your mother pretended it was completely normal, as if it had your blessing or something. My blessing? I didn't know, Evan. I swear I assumed someone would have. This is really messed up. I ended the call gently. I can't recall much after that. Just a sense that the room had slanted sideways and gravity was off. That day I did not eat, work or shower. I simply gazed. I wanted to shout. I wanted to rip the place apart. But all I could do was sit there, transfixed by a fact that everyone else knew but me. Nobody thought I deserved to know the truth. Not even Ryan or Olivia. Not even my parents. The betrayal wasn't simply because they were together. It was something my entire family knew. They had grinned, posed for photographs, and toasted champagne flutes under fairy lights. All the while, I sat in my apartment, fully oblivious, hoping to see everyone again next vacation. Maybe this year they'll come to me for Thanksgiving. Maybe I'd finally be enough for Mom to brag about to her family. But I didn't even get a seat at the table. The breaking point came 9 days later, when Ryan finally phoned me. The name appeared on my computer like it hadn't in months. I glanced at it for 4 rings before responding. "Hello," I said. His voice seemed overly pleasant. "Evan. Hey guy. I've been meaning to call. Sorry about the delay. Honeymoon planning has been chaotic." I did not say anything. "You doing well?" he asked. "Dad claimed you were distant. Is this what he said?" A heartbeat. "Yeah. Listen, I know you saw the wedding details. I'm so sorry, guy. We weren't sure how." "What should be done?" I interrupted. "How to inform your brother you're marrying the woman he adores." He became quiet. I waited. "It's just happened," he said eventually. "We ran into each other after you guys parted ways and there was a connection. We didn't intend for it to be serious, but it was." "How long, Evan? How long?" He exhaled. "Approximately 11 months. I nodded despite his inability to see me. Approximately 11 months. So, they'd been together while I was still hopeful that Olivia and I could reconcile. While I was sending those awkward texts and grieving the end of the relationship, they were already forming a new one behind my back, under the smiling gaze of my family. And they hadn't simply hidden it. They had celebrated it. "You didn't invite me," I said. "Not even as a guest. You did not even warn me. You just acted as if I didn't exist." "We didn't want to hurt you," he added quietly. "So why did you do it?" "I do not know." That was the truth. He probably didn't know. He only wanted what he wanted, and I was inconvenient. "I've always had your back," I responded, my voice trembling. "When you were dismissed, I paid your rent. I assisted you in rewriting your resume after you failed at your first job. When you crashed my automobile, I did not ask you to pay for it, and this is how you repay me. Please, Evan, I didn't intend for it to happen like this. I do not care what you meant. I care what you did." He began to say something else, but I hung up. I sat there for a long time afterward, the air heavy with betrayal. I was no longer just mourning a romance. I was mourning a family, a sense of belonging that I'd clung to like a fool. A lifetime of playing the role of the dependable son, the underappreciated sibling, the one who always maintained order. That guy was gone. I did not anger, I did not send a long email, I didn't make a dramatic call out online, but I did start writing something else, a plan. Rock bottom does not always mean flashing lights and sirens. Sometimes it appears quietly, like a weight you didn't notice until it began to crush your lungs. For me, it was a Tuesday afternoon. I was just walking into the grocery store down the street to get eggs and bread when I saw Mom. She was in the produce section, holding a head of lettuce and laughing at what the woman next to her said. I froze. My stomach clenched. Not from anger, but from something worse. Shame. I did not want her to see me. I didn't want to hear whatever lies she had concocted to soothe her conscience. I didn't want her fake warmth or her eyes acting as if none of this had happened. So I turned around and walked out, leaving my basket behind, got into my car, sat behind the wheel, and stared at my hands. That was the moment. That's when it really hit home. I couldn't even be in the same room as my mother without feeling emotionally impacted. I went home, turned off the phone, and vanished. For weeks I operated on autopilot. I handled fewer client calls. I missed deadlines. I declined the invitations. There weren't very many. Chris attempted to check in, but I kept our conversations short. I was tired of everything. Of pretending that I was not broken. I resisted the urge to text Olivia and scrolled past more wedding photos every time I opened Instagram. My apartment became a jumble of pizza boxes, laundry piles, and unopened mail. The only constant was the dull, quiet ache that lived in my chest. However, the world did not come to a halt simply because I felt it should. Rent was due. Bills required payment. And somewhere behind the ruins of my dignity, I still had clients. So I showed up gently and silently. I took on a few modest assignments, including web updates, redesigns, and WordPress themes for boutique firms. The task did not make me feel better, but it did help the hours pass faster. Then something changed. One afternoon I received an email from a contractor I used to work with some years ago. Jason Cole was a tech startup founder with a crazy beard and a penchant for coffee that tasted like charred tree bark. He required someone to develop the back end of his company's new app. "I remember your work," he wrote. "Are you still available?" I nearly said no. I almost erased the email, but something inside me clicked. It was the first time in weeks that someone treated me as if I were more than simply a rejected brother or ex-boyfriend. I replied back, we set up a call, and I was back in. The project was intense. 4 months, tight deadlines, and complicated architecture, yet I pushed myself into it. It was not about money. It was not even about distraction. It was all about control. When I couldn't fix my own family, I started over and built something new. I worked late at night, often until 2:30 a.m. My apartment remained a disaster. But my code was clear, sharp and tight, right in the middle of all that. I remembered who I was. I was not Ryan's shadow. I wasn't the backup son. I was not the one who was left out. I was Evan, the guy who created websites for local bands in high school, began freelancing in college, and managed his own one-man studio for 7 years. I had clients from 3 nations. I'd helped launch 3 businesses from scratch. I wasn't simply floating. I was undervalued. And the knowledge hit hard. One night in mid-fall, I went for a walk around the lake near my flat. It was late, the air was crisp, and the sky was full of stars. I did not bring my phone. I did not listen to music. I just walked. For the first time in months I felt still, not pleased or healed, but as if I wasn't going to shatter. Every time someone discussed family, weddings, or betrayal, I would breathe. That was sufficient. However, something else was also shifting. I started looking through my images. Not the wedding ones. My travels, my work, my friends, and the recollections that were unrelated to Ryan, Olivia, or my parents. I discovered an old photo of me at a coding boot camp I helped run 3 years ago, smiling and confidently teaching things to a bunch of excited college students. That person was still inside. So I tried something I hadn't done in a long time. I revamped my website. Not merely a portfolio, brand, or platform. I cleaned up my customer list, updated my testimonials, and included new case studies. I hired a designer friend to redesign my logo. I even made a blog post about building when you're burned out. It was not poetic, it was not viral, but it was genuine, and people responded. Emails came in. Bookings result in a minor increase in site traffic. Then a direct message from someone at a mid-size creative agency. They were looking for part-time contractors and liked my voice. A month later, I signed a retainer agreement with them. And with that, I was no longer just surviving. I started building again. My daily existence changed as well. I began getting up early not out of stress but on purpose. I made coffee, opened the windows and brought light into my cave-like living room. I purchased a plant, it perished. I purchased another one, it did not. Small wins. I reconnected with Chris. I started saying yes to things again. Dinners, game nights, and even a hiking excursion were activities I would have shunned previously. Therapy followed next. Not because I broke down, but because I didn't want to do it again. I found a man named Dr. Andrew Collins. Quiet, sharp, and did not use excessive force. During our first appointment I told him, "I think I lost my family." He nodded. We unpacked carefully. The favoritism, the quiet, the treachery. The way I always felt like I had to earn affection, whilst Ryan simply accepted it. I shrunk myself to avoid being a burden, and I clung to crumbs of affection like they were food. Dr. Andrew Collins did not do miracles, but he did listen. And for the first time someone confirmed that maybe I wasn't crazy. That perhaps the pain I had borne since childhood wasn't just bad luck. It was a pattern, which might be broken. Meanwhile my parents remained mute. No word from Mom. No apologies or explanations. I heard from Lauren once. She texted me stating she hoped everything was fine. Ryan and Olivia had moved into a new place and Mom was attempting to make things right. I didn't say anything, not because I was angry but because I was done filling quiet with forgiveness. One night Chris and I were having cocktails when he asked, "So what's next? Are you just chopping them off forever?" I did not have a response. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. Not in the way I expected. I didn't intend to burn bridges, write angry letters or post call-outs online. I did not need them to grovel. I simply wanted to stop bleeding. And I did, slowly and silently, but I was paying attention. Because revenge isn't always about fire and fury. Sometimes it's about clarity, waiting for the appropriate moment, not out of spite, but with precision. And when it arrived, I'd know because something in me had changed. I wasn't the extra anymore. I was not the one who was left behind. I was the one who got up anyway. It started with a quick email. Hello Evan. Long time no talk. From a name I hadn't thought of in years. Taylor Brooks. We'd been to college together. Same dorm, same computer science group. She was brilliant and keen, with a biting sense of humor and a laugh that could cut through any terrible day. We lost touch after college when she moved out west to work for a tech company in Seattle. But she appeared in my email like a ghost, knocking pleasantly. Subject line, fast query, and perhaps an opportunity. I opened it. She was launching a large venture-backed platform that was still in its early stages. A hybrid between a creative freelancing hub and an AI-powered resource planner. She wrote, "We're building tools for the next wave of remote creatives. I need someone I can trust to lead development on the infrastructure side." Your name appeared more than once. It seemed weird, as if the universe was delivering something I hadn't asked for yet really needed. That night I connected with her via Zoom. She appeared older, but in a good way. More focused and forceful. We caught up quickly, discussing specifications, timeframes, and team dynamics. The deal was not only lucrative, it was strategic, with great visibility, substantial equity, and long-term promise. She did not only want me to lay the foundation, she wanted me to be a member of the core. I agreed before we even hung up, and with that, I had a new engine. For the first few weeks I was completely overwhelmed with work. But it wasn't the desperate drowning I did after the wedding to avoid my feelings. This was planned and structured. I participated in team calls, sprint planning meetings, and GitHub threads. I was developing clean code and assisting juniors in debugging their reasoning, working late hours to create scalable systems that mattered. I was not simply rebuilding my life. I was developing someone else's vision. I was valuable. That's when the idea of not vengeance began to grow. Not at first, just curiosity. You see, when you are burned by individuals you trusted, who make you feel invisible, the sorrow does not stop there. It starts there. Then you start to think, how long has this been going on? What did I miss? What else are they hiding? You should cease presuming good intentions. You start digging. After a particularly long sprint review I poured a glass of wine, sat down at my desk and opened an old Google Drive folder that I hadn't looked at in almost a year. It was called Family Docs, and it contained just receipts, bills, joint agreements, and other items from when I used to assist Dad with tech issues or manage the family vacation rental properties web listings for free. He appointed me as administrator of the shared Google account we'd used to keep everything organized a long time ago. Apparently, he never removed me. I wasn't looking for anything special, but as I clicked through, the shape of things began to shift. There were spreadsheets, annual taxes, invoices, and maintenance records. One property was branded Lakeside. I opened it. That's when I realized the wedding didn't take place at a posh resort or Airbnb. It had been at our family's lake house, which we used to visit every summer. I hadn't been there in about 3 years because of a plumbing issue, and no one seemed to use it anymore, but clearly someone had. The spreadsheet corroborated this. There were transactions for furniture rentals, food and security that occurred only a few weeks before the wedding. Expenses paid from a joint family account. My name was still on the account. I helped put it up when Dad became swamped with taxes and they used it without asking or notifying me. They'd held a $38,500 wedding on land I officially co-owned, with my name on the books, and they hadn't even sent me a text. That's when the setup started. Not out of spite but to clarify. Step 1 was simple. Make sure everything was clean on my end. I backed up all documents, spreadsheets, invoices and calendar invites over the last 7 years. I logged the IP addresses. I downloaded PDF copies. I kept a version history of every change I made to whatever I had access to. I wanted proof, not necessarily for court, but for me. Step 2. Contact my lawyer. I hadn't spoken to Rachel Stone in a while. She was a straight-talking old-school buddy of the family. She helped me establish up my LLC when I initially started freelancing. I scheduled a session on the pretense of wanting to resolve some property ownership difficulties. When we got on the phone, I described everything except the emotional turmoil. Just the facts: shared account, property, and unauthorized use. She whistled. "Evan, this isn't good for them. Do you want to press charges?" "Not yet," I replied. "But I do want to know what my options are." We spent an hour discussing logistics. It turns out that my parents had never properly removed me from any of the ownership documents. Technically, the lake house remained in a family trust, with my name as one of the beneficiaries. That means I had every right to seek documents, prevent repeat instances, and even request an audit. It also meant that the $38,500 wedding required my permission for any substantial renovations or rentals. They hadn't received it. Step 3. Acquire allies. This was not about mobilizing troops. I was not going to march through Thanksgiving dinner with printouts and accusations, but I did begin having quiet chats. For example, I invited Lauren to coffee. She appeared frightened, as if she expected me to eventually explode. Instead, I posed a simple inquiry. "How long have they kept things from me?" She groaned and told me how Mom had begun treating Olivia like a daughter-in-law even before the separation. Ryan began turning up to family functions without alerting me, claiming that I was too busy at work.
Nah.
Mom would tighten her lips whenever she inquired about me. "He's figuring things out," she'd say. I thanked Lauren and said, "Don't pry." Then I told her about the property, the account, and the unpaid obligation of inclusion. Her expression altered. She didn't know. And now she has. I wasn't looking to turn Lauren against them, but it was critical that someone else noticed what I saw. That this was more than simply feelings. It was about choices, repeated ones, financial and legal ones. Over the next few weeks, I continued to quietly rebuild. My position at Taylor Brooks' startup was going better than expected. We launched our beta, received coverage from 2 mid-tier tech blogs, and signed a few high-profile clients. I kept my head down and worked, but in the background the gears were turning. I sent a formal request to the family trust accountant for an audit of expenses and future plans for the lake house. Rachel Stone emphasized that there should be no accusations, only transparency. It was the type of motion that caused a ripple without creating a splash. I was exerting my presence without setting anything on fire. 9 days later, I received a call from Dad. He sounded exhausted, cautious. "Evan says he received your email. I wanted to talk." I let the silence stretch. "You know, you've always had a portion in the lake house," he said. "That has never been in question. So why was I never consulted?" He exhaled. "There wasn't time. The wedding came together quickly." 4 months of planning is not a quick process, Dad. It was complicated. No, it was convenient. You did not want to deal with me. More silence. Finally, he remarked, "Look, if this is about Olivia, it's not." I lied. Because it was. Of course it was. But it was also about them. The erasing, and how they had transformed me into a ghost in my own existence. I wasn't looking for closure. I was making certain they felt the impact of my absence. "We'll talk as a family soon," Dad responded, attempting to appear reasonable. "Figure this out." "Sure," I answered. "Let me know when everyone's ready to be honest." I hung up, but I didn't wait because I wasn't just establishing a boundary. I was setting up the board. It occurred silently. No explosions, no confrontations, just a series of courteous formal notices that flipped my family's world upside down. The kind of vengeance you don't notice coming until it's halfway through your house, taking your beloved chair out the door. By late October, the leaves had begun to fall. I was 14 weeks into my new work at Taylor Brooks' startup, and we had recently executed a huge investment deal that increased my equity to the high 6 figures on paper. I was sleeping better, smiling more, and taking care of myself in minor mundane ways, such as cooking my own food and responding to texts from friends in a timely manner. That was when I received a notification from the trust accountant. He had concluded the audit. The numbers were worse than I had anticipated. Over the last year, the shared family property account, in which I retained legal ownership, had been used to fund $38,500 plus for the lakeside wedding, $8,750 for landscaping upgrades, $6,100 for venue cleaning and painting, $2,850 for floral design and tent rentals, $1,950 for guest parking and off-site transportation, and most notably, $16,500 for a guest dock renovation. Marked for reception launch viewing. I recall Dad claiming the dock was too decayed to fix 2.5 years ago when I offered to help renovate it so I could bring a few buddies up for the summer. Now it appears to be wedding worthy. What made this even worse was that all of those transactions had been approved and paid through the trust account, which meant they were theoretically made with my money. My name appeared on the paperwork. My ownership status had not changed. They not only excluded me, but also utilized me. Rachel Stone was outraged when I showed her. She said, "You could easily take them to court right now and win." But I didn't want a courtroom. I desired closure. Real, undeniable, and permanent. So I asked her to write a formal letter. Not pushy, not dramatic, but firm. It sought complete compensation for half of all wedding-related expenses, dock renovations and unapproved upgrades, as well as an offer. I was willing to sell my half of the lake house for market value. And because I had the foresight to hire a property assessor the previous month, I knew exactly what that value was. $985,000, which meant my portion was $492,500. We mailed the letter certified, with a return receipt request, and I waited. 3 weeks later, Mom called me. She did not sound angry. She sounded hurt. When her control went, she would resort to that passive, gasping anguish. "Evan, I just received your mail. I assumed you would. This is so much money. Where are you expecting us to acquire this? I do not. I anticipate you to refinance, liquidate or sell the property. Would you really sell your part of the family lake house over this? You already did when you utilized it without my permission." She did not speak for a moment. I could hear a tremor in her breath. Then she said, "This isn't like you." "You are correct. It's not." That was the last time I spoke with her. A week later, I received an email from a real estate attorney representing my parents and Ryan. They wished to negotiate. They offered me $190,000 as a reasonable compromise. I declined. I didn't become angry. I provided an official value, images of the trust agreement, copies of the audit, and a clear line. $492,500, or I forced the sale. They called my bluff, and I followed through. Rachel Stone filed the petition. Because of the trust arrangement, I had the ability to seek a sale in court if no buyout deal could be achieved within 3 months. They attempted to stall, claimed emotional value, and even suggested that I had already verbally given my portion. But every stalling attempt simply made matters worse. It turns out that forcing the sale of a family home makes matters extremely public. A listing appeared in February. Charming 4-bedroom waterfront property suitable for parties or full-time living. The real estate agent released glossy images of the recently painted dock, the groomed gardens, the wide-open reception area, the same location where my brother married, and the same pier where they toasted a new life that I was not invited to see. The offers arrived swiftly. By March the home had sold for $1,010,000. After taxes and fees, I received a wire transfer for $486,000, clean, lawful, and final. A week later, I shared a simple message on Facebook. No names, no gloating, just this. It's strange how people call you dramatic for setting boundaries after years of making you feel invisible. Anyway, thank you for the dock upgrade. It received 158 likes, 21 comments and several private notes from extended family. Most just remarked, "Wow." Or, "I had no idea." One of my cousins commented, "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. You deserved more." But the nicest message came from an unexpected source, Olivia. It appeared unexpectedly on a Wednesday night. "I've heard about the house. I did not know everything. I apologize for everything." I looked at it for a long time. Then I blocked her, not because I was furious but because she no longer deserved to be at my table. Ryan also tried calling several times. He once left a voicemail. "Evan, this situation has gotten out of hand. We didn't expect things to go this way. But that's the issue with folks who take you for granted. They never expect it to cost them anything. They interpret your quiet as agreement, your kindness as weakness, and your absence from their celebrations as a sign that you are too insignificant to matter until you charge them for the venue." Ryan and Olivia had to leave their condo and return to live with Mom and Dad for a bit, according to what I've heard. The selling of the lake house had a much greater impact on their finances than they had anticipated. They'd taken out loans to pay for the wedding, hoping to return the costs by renting out the lake property in the future, but that future was no longer possible. Meanwhile, I relocated and spent some of the money to purchase a stylish modest condo downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors, and a short walk to the greatest coffee in town. I continued to work with Taylor Brooks, invested in a few small firms on the side, purchased a cat, and gradually resumed dating, but I never reached out. Not to Mom, Ryan or the others who sat on that dock toasting a new family while pretending I didn't exist, because I finally knew what they never did. Being invited is not equivalent to being included. And now they are shut out because I changed the locks.